Ajalon, winnie, winnie, bembe, bembe, miyanisa, afefe, sheshe, efufu, lele, yawa, Bandele Books presents The Windweaver Storm, Book 2 of the T.J. Young and the Orishas series. Written by Antoine Bandele. Read for you by Nekia Renee Martin. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fantasy fiction and not an accurate depiction of the living practice of Ifa and its many branches and followers in the motherland and the diaspora. Dedication. This one is for the 14-year-old Antoine who had his head in the clouds. Chapter 1. Overpromise, Underdeliver. Everything should have been perfect for TJ Young. He had just had the best summer of his life. Camp Alosa for remedial magic had accepted him. He stared down giant alligators, took on more than one of the ancient Orishas, and then got an invite to the magical school of West Africa, Ifa Academy for Tomorrow's Diviners. But there was this enormous weight hanging on his shoulders. His promise. The stupidest promise he could have ever made. It was all he could think about despite it being summer, a teenager's prime vacation. Despite a soothing breeze coming in from his bedroom window, that promise festered in the wrinkles of his brain. Sure, he totally broke the illusions of Yewa, the Orisha of cadavers. And yeah, he found an ally in Eshu, the Gatekeeper. But he didn't have the stuff to bring down Olokun, the Orisha of the Deep Blue Sea. So, instead of getting eaten by a horde of sharks and eels that swam around with Olokun like minions, TJ made a deal. A favor for a favor. TJ had told Olokun that, 1, he could restore the praise the great deity had lost over the centuries, and 2, that TJ could do away with Echo Atlantic. Now, that first one was pretty simple. If all TJ had to do was go around and preach the good word, run a few fundraisers or whatever, that wasn't so bad. Sure, the big guy was probably looking for praise from more than just a handful of people, but TJ could at least manage that much. No, it was the second condition that really twisted his stomach in knots. A request that meant tearing down a city of skyscrapers that had been building up for as long as TJ had been alive. You see, Echo Atlantic wasn't some underwater fortress, as TJ had assumed when he first made the promise. It was a human settlement near Lagos, Nigeria, the largest land reclamation project of its time, and a huge no-no for a deity who called the ocean waters his rightful domain. A flash from TJ's laptop winked in and out, bringing him out of his stupor. Well, it wasn't TJ's laptop. It was his little brother's. TJ's junk of a machine was too slow, and his brothers had all these fancy plugins and notifications only a whiz kid like him had access to. And because the laptop wasn't his, TJ was spending most of his time looking over his shoulder at the closed door. The webpage he had up at the moment was a secret site only diviners could access, called Evocation. For weeks, TJ had been refreshing it to see if any sightings of Orishas in the real world had come up. Olokun in particular. When TJ refreshed the page for the 10th time, an itch came at the tip of his index finger. He scratched it with his thumb and glanced down at the faint tattoo that was baked there. It was shaped like a forked line on a cross, the symbol of Eshu, another reminder of the divine contract he had tied himself to. Besides the tattoo, the blinking light of the countdown app on his phone was a pretty decent reminder as well, and at the moment it read, Echo Atlantic's doomsday in 25 weeks, 1 day, 6 hours, 23 minutes, and 39 seconds. TJ had had 2 weeks to think it over, yet he couldn't for the life of him even start to work out a plan that would make the deity happy, while preventing the breakdown of years' worth of Nigerian efforts and labors. TJ let out a very long and very loud grunt as he leaned back into what was once his sister's desk chair. Had he still been sharing a room with his little brother, his frustrated outburst would have earned a "get over it," or "could you vent somewhere else," followed by his brother taking his laptop back. Mom and Dad had given TJ his older sister's room when he got back from summer camp. TJ still wasn't used to it. It was like he was invading his sister's space. These days, he wasn't so sure what to think about his sister. For the entire summer, he had tried to uncover how she died, how she was killed. But instead of an answer, he had an eventful run-in with the Orishas and some of his sister's old friends. A handful of words kept pressing into his brain. If Dayo was a keeper, Tomori. That traitor, Mr. Bulawe. No, Bulawe had said, "Your sister was one of us. She was our promised child." TJ still couldn't believe it. Everyone had said Dayo was the hero of Nigeria, the promised child meant to bring the Orishas back into the world, not some keeper who dealt in death and destruction. Nothing in Dayo's journal said anything about being a radical magical terrorist, and she wrote everything in there, even left it for TJ to learn from. Bulawe was just trying to throw him off. TJ had experienced the Keeper's wrath only a few months ago when they attacked Dayo's funeral. Bulawe had to be lying. If Dayo really was some Keeper, why would they attack one of their own? All said, though, TJ still couldn't find a reason Bulawe would lie either. Pinching his temples, TJ turned from the blinking reminder on his phone and stared at the bedroom wall instead. Mom said he could change whatever he liked in the room, but TJ preferred it the way it was, how Dayo had decorated it. The wallpaper was a constellation of stars in the shape of several Orishas. TJ had stared at it more times than he could count whenever he felt overwhelmed. Since coming back from camp, he had started silently critiquing Mom's interpretations of the Orishas. The painted Eshu didn't look quite the same as the real one, who was more pudgy than toned, and Mom had not drawn a Lokun to scale. In reality, he towered over Eshu 10 or 20 times over, but the painting only had him twice as big. A buzz vibrated against TJ's thigh. He slipped his hand into his jean pocket and pulled out his phone. His screen revealed a text message from the one person who always made him forget about his worries, Manny. If TJ could make a highlight reel out of last summer, meeting her would definitely be at the top. Well, actually, number one would probably be surviving a trip to the Aqua Realm. But a very close second would definitely be meeting Manny. She was sort of the best. Kind, compassionate, into all the geeky stuff TJ was into. And yeah, she was easy on the eyes too. And maybe TJ had acquired a teeny tiny crush on her. But who could blame him? Manny was awesome. Opening his messaging app, he scanned his friend's text, which read, Manny, you know you're way funnier over text. Manny, your gift choices are... She had sent him an animated picture of a chef kissing his hand and blowing it into the delicious air. TJ scanned through their previous conversations. It was true, many of his responses were in the form of silly gifts, but he couldn't help it. Words just couldn't correctly communicate what looping images could. Still, he couldn't help reading Manny's text in the worst possible tone imaginable. Rational thought would have had him reading her message with that slightly husky Brooklyn inflection, one almost always laced with humor. But TJ couldn't help reading it as a jab. Did she mean he wasn't funny unless he was sending gifts? Was he a total bore when they spoke to each other in person? The gentle hum of Manny's next text broke TJ from his self-destructing reverie. Manny, by the way, have you ever seen the Dust of the Blood Moon movies before? TJ sat up straight in his chair and did a lightning-fast Google search for the dust of the blue moon. The results popped up with posters of shirtless teen boys played by men in their 30s, one with blood caked around his mouth, the other with wolf's hair sprouting over his back. TJ's thumb flew over his app and swiped back to his text with Manny. TJ. That's not that vampire emoji, werewolf emoji stuffs, is it? Manny. Yup. I'm gonna buy some copies for us right now. Smiling emoji. They'll be waiting for you in Brooklyn. Waiting for me in Brooklyn? TJ thought curiously, though he couldn't help feeling a pang of joy that Manny had basically invited him all the way from Los Angeles to visit her and watch So Bad They're Good movies. Yeah, that text message about the gifts was definitely just a joke. But why had she said Brooklyn and not Nigeria? Not New Ile Ife, where Ife Academy was? Letting his thumbs fly free, TJ replied, TJ, Brooklyn? Don't you mean New Ile Ife? TJ, you're going to Ife Academy, aren't you? TJ, I mean, with you-know-who being a you-know-what that puts you and Ayo in top 2 in the camp standings, right? TJ, you're not going to accept the invite? TJ really needed to get out of the habit of sending single lines instead of one long text. That summer at Camp Olosa, TJ's friends were all in the top 3. TJ didn't even make it to the top 20, and Ife Academy still accepted him. The top student was a kid named Joshua, who actually turned out to be the Orisha Eshu hiding in a human boy's body. Sort of unfair and totally against the rules. That put his friend Ayo, the Nigerian man-bun wonder, at the top, and Manny just behind him. So the academy invited them right away. In fact, now that TJ thought about it, Manny had barely mentioned Ife Academy all summer. She had always gotten real quiet whenever the magic school was brought up in conversation. TJ just thought she had gotten over whatever kept her from the place. TJ sat staring at his phone screen. There were no 3 dots showing Manny was composing a response. Shit. Is she really not going to Ife? TJ started typing another message but deleted it immediately after. If there was one thing he knew about texting girls, despite his very limited experience, it was never to look too eager. Never send a question after another question. Maybe Manny got caught up with one of her 4 brothers, or perhaps her mom had her running an errand. But as the minutes snailed on, the bottom of TJ's stomach emptied. He didn't want to go to Ife Academy on his own. Sure, Ayo would be there. But it wasn't the same as Manny. It took all of TJ's willpower not to pick up his phone and blast Manny with a stream of texts, gifts and all. Instead, he put his phone on his desk just as Mom called out, Tomori Jomiloju, come down here right quick. TJ shuffled out of his room. As he swung the door open, the savory smell of the fried plantains Mom had cooked that morning blessed his nostrils. Motivated by a watering mouth, TJ jogged downstairs, but Dad waved him over from the bedroom door down the hall. Dad's bald head glinted in the afternoon light from the hallway window. Psst, son. Can you get this to your mom for me? I'm sitting on this eBay bid right now. Can't miss it. TJ took a thick envelope from Dad. If it weren't bursting at the seams, TJ would never have seen the dollar bills poking out. What's this? TJ asked. Nothing. Just get it to your mother, please. TJ took a peek over Dad's shoulder. He caught the image of a Kobe Bryant Ricky card on a computer screen before Dad closed the door partially. You're not selling your cards now, are you? TJ asked, crushing the envelope a little. Last summer, his family had hit a few financial woes, a lot of that stemming from the tuition he needed to pay for summer camp. And now, with Ife Academy. Hey, you said not to sell family heirlooms, Dad answered, catching TJ's frown. I've been meaning to sell my collection for years. You know that. Dad, TJ gritted. Get that to your mom, like I said. Dad closed the door all the way and his slippers pat-patted away behind it. Then the click-clack of fingers over a keyboard followed, and finally a shout of, "Oh yeah, up to 500. It's not even mint condition." TJ groaned. He climbed down the stairs as quickly as he could to stop himself from pounding on Dad's door and telling him to unsell that Kobe Ricky card. In his haste, he nearly bumped into Tunde, his little brother, who was balancing precariously on an old ladder in the foyer. One foot tiptoed and the other in the air. He stretched out as long as he could with one of his fingers touching the underside of a light bulb, which pulsed on and off. Unlike TJ, Tunde hadn't hit his growth spurt yet. "Wouldn't it be easier to just get a new bulb?" TJ asked as he craned his neck up to Tunde. With tongue out and sun-baked dreadlocks hanging, Tunde strained a, "This is one of the few times Mom lets me use magic in the house. So, no." TJ laughed. "What charm are you trying to use?" "Over Mila's glow." "Got it." TJ closed his eyes, focused the ashe in his chest, and searched for the ashe within Tunde's own. At the moment, he was like a second battery for his brother's magic, which feebly roiled through the dying light of the spent bulb. Thanks to TJ, though, in mere moments, brightness filled the whole of the foyer. You see, that was TJ's unique ability, the one that didn't have any scholarships he could apply for, a gift not shared by any diviner in the world. TJ was like a steroid of magic, an extra charge he could manifest to boost other diviners and channel into himself. "You're welcome," TJ said, smiling. Tunde had always outpaced him with magic in the past, but these days it was often the other way around. Yeah, whatever, lucky charm." Last year, heck, even a few months ago, TJ would have scoffed at the nickname. At one time, he thought it totally sucked. And yeah, it was still pretty lame that his claim to fame was essentially being a glorified sidekick to all his friends and family. But still, it was nice being helpful and wanted, even begrudgingly. With a little hop in his step, TJ made his way to the living room where Mom held her hands aloft. Several long, dark dashiki with 2 gray stripes going down the chest hovered in the air. Their swirling shimmy bounced in rhythm with Mom's hands, like she was some orchestrator. And as she swayed, her towering palm tree-like dreadlocks swung with her. "Hey, Mom. Dad told me to get this to you." TJ waved the envelope in hand. "Oh, just set it on the table there," she answered, and TJ did as he was told. "Now, stand right where you are." Before TJ could ask what that meant, one of the long dashikis attacked him, forcing its way over his head and down his torso. What's going on?" TJ flailed his arms as the shirt fought to get its sleeve over his wrist. TJ was somewhere between the dashiki's neck opening and the arm slit when he caught a flash of Simba, the family dog, running into the room. Simba barked at the other sleeve that was trying to force its way down TJ's other arm. Mom snapped her fingers and Simba sat, but his tail still wagged, ready to pounce again if necessary. "Oh, honey bunny, stop fighting. I'm just seeing which of these uniforms fits you." Once the dashiki had settled in place over TJ's body, it stopped its wiggling. But the thing was tight, much too tight. Like rockstar skinny jeans tight. TJ could barely breathe. "Nuh-uh, that won't do." Mom flipped a finger and the dashiki squirmed back up TJ's neck. The fight to get it off was just as bad as putting it on. The next dashiki, however, was as easy as putting on a poncho. That is to say, it was much too large. "Oh, that won't do either. Bora si no afefe." Mom snapped her finger and the dashiki whipped away. For what felt like an hour, TJ and Mom tried on every combination of clothes. Whenever TJ thought they had found a perfect fit, Mom would suck her teeth long and stretched out in her old Nigerian habit before saying, "No, no, the shoulders aren't right." Or, "No, the chest is too loose. You have to look sharp and presentable for your first day at the academy." And when TJ thought they were finally done, Mom spent an extra few minutes enchanting the dashiki so that it would grow with TJ throughout the year. With all the commotion dying down, Simba shuffled out of the room, probably to find a suitable spot to nap. "I swear, I blink and you're 2 inches taller." Mom shook her head but pinched TJ's cheeks. It was true, though. At the beginning of summer, he was just under Mom's eyeline. Now he got a pretty good view of her forehead. "I can't believe you're really going to IFA. Did you fill out all of your emergency forms? Did you get all of your labels on your belongings? Did you practice your charm work for self-washing towels? Did you—" Ma! I got it. I got everything on lock." TJ chuckled. If he had to rank who was most excited that he was going to magic school, it would be Mom way up at the top and then him a fair few levels below her. Not because TJ didn't want to go. He couldn't wait either. But Mom had been waiting for that day for years. "Oh!" Mom skipped to the table with the envelope. "I've got to remember to send this off tomorrow and exchange it for enchanted cowries. School uniforms aren't cheap." TJ avoided Mom's eyes at that. She knew he didn't like it when she mentioned money around him, and at that moment, she was likely cringing for slipping up. So he just ran his hand over his school uniform, which indeed felt like an expensive material of whatever you called it. He touched his fingers to the embroidered sigil over his heart, the coat of arms of IFA Academy, a collection of swirls and lines TJ didn't know the meaning of. What are these 2 gray stripes going down for? "Oh, those are blank until they're filled in with your 2 Orisha colors at the start of term." Mom pointed up to her old school uniform, which hung in a frame next to her university degrees and other awards, right next to Dayo's countless trophies. TJ still hadn't told his parents what Bolawe said last year about Dayo being a keeper. Until he found out the truth, he wouldn't slander his sister's name, least of all to Mom. "You see," Mom went on, "the left stripe on the uniform is for my primary Orisha, Yemoja, so it's blue and white. But then my secondary Orisha, Orunmila, is green and yellow. See it there on the right?" Something on the TV snatched Mom's attention away. "Baby, what did they say on the news just now?" TJ followed Mom's gaze to the screen, where an image of Times Square was plastered across the screen. Only it was a Times Square TJ was unfamiliar with. Instead of all the bright lights and flashing billboards, everything was smashed, glass shattered, poles overturned, and an enormous crowd spotlighted by overhead helicopters. The horror of the image had Mom looking for balance on the nearby sofa. TJ's heart stopped on him. What had happened? TJ flitted his fingers in the air to magically depress the volume up button on the remote lounging on the couch. "Breaking news," a Nigerian female voice said over the image. "Again, this is Diva Nation Today breaking news. There have been reports of a blackout in Times Square. The cause is unknown, but early sources say a diviner child might have been the catalyst." TJ bit at his lip nervously as he tried to tell himself that Manny wasn't involved. There had to be a bunch of magical children in New York, not just her. But TJ's thoughts tended to spring to the worst. It couldn't be helped when the images on the TV kept cutting between people running down streets and freaking out. "Chica," a male voice, also Nigerian, returned with a reporter's clean cadence. "Can you tell us when this occurred?" "Unclear. It seems to have happened only 5 minutes ago. But Diva Nation Today is always the first to report." "Oh, this just in from the studio. It seems like this all was a movie production gone wrong. Perhaps this was just..." Mom's phone rang, and she answered it immediately. "Hey there, Manuela. We just heard the report on DT. Are you okay? You live in Brooklyn, right? You weren't anywhere near Times Square, were you?" There was a pause, and TJ strained to hear what Manny was saying on the other line. "Oh, good. What? Oh, yes. He's right here." Mom dropped the phone from her ear. "It's your friend Manuela. She wants to speak with you." TJ did an internal facepalm. He'd left his phone upstairs. Manny must have been calling him like crazy. TJ took the phone quickly from Mom and said, "Sup, Manny?" "Play along," she said sharply in a hushed tone. Then she raised her voice theatrically. "Hey, Mamai. Can you get somewhere private?" TJ had no clue why Manny was addressing him as Mom in Portuguese, but that probably meant she was around people who couldn't know she was speaking with him. "Yeah?" TJ answered. "I can get my phone from upstairs. Sorry, I left it up there. What's going on?" "Yes, I'm okay, Ma. Don't worry. The UCMP has me. I got a visit from an Orisha. My Orisha. Oya has a message for my friend, TJ Young." Chapter 2. Ethereal Entanglements. Hand shaking, TJ gave the phone back to Mom and asked to be excused upstairs. He still couldn't believe what Manny had told him. There were rumors across the magical web that Orishas were showing themselves to diviners, but there was nothing about them calling directly to mortals. And apparently one of them, the Orisha of Storms for crying out loud, wanted a personal appointment with TJ himself? What was up with that? "What's got you all hot and bothered, honey bunny?" Mom grinned with a knowing smile. She knew about TJ's crush, despite him saying nothing of it to her, motherly instincts or whatever. But TJ had said nothing to her about the promise he made to Olokun, or the gargantuan predicament he found himself in. "Nothing," he answered. "I just gotta send something from my phone to Manny. I'll be right back down." "All right then. Dinner will be ready in an hour or two." TJ gave Mom a swift kiss on the cheek, then raced up to his bedroom, slid his phone from his desk, and FaceTimed Manny straight away. His video call barely rang a millisecond before Manny answered. Hey, hold on. Let me add Dad to the call." Her hair was already big and unruly, but just then it looked like a leaf blower had had its way with her thick coils. "Dad, can you hear me?" A moment later, a second person, who was definitely not Manny's dad, slid into view. He had a pudgier face than Manny's dad, wore designer glasses which sat snugly atop his wide nose, and a neat little man bun topped his thick head. "Ayodeji Oyelowo." Yeah, I can hear you," Ayo groaned from his bed as he pushed his glasses up his nose. "Why are you calling me your dad? What's going on? I was about to go to sleep. You do know it's 1 a.m. round my way, right?" "Play along," TJ murmured, but it didn't matter when both Manny and Ayo had earbuds in. "Sorry, Dad. I lost track of time," Manny answered, her breath labored. "But this is important. Was there anything on divination today about Times Square?" "Yeah," TJ answered. "Something about a blackout and a movie production. I wasn't really paying attention at first." Manny shook her head. "That's not what happened. Oya was there. She did all that. Or, I guess, I did all that." TJ recalled the destruction of Times Square, all that broken glass, the people running. A sharp shiver ran down his back at the thought of what Oya had done. "Where are you right now?" Ayo pushed his glasses up his nose. "Are you in a car?" Yeah. 2 UCMP officers are taking me into their headquarters now. Tell Tia Teresa not to worry." It did look like Manny was in the back of a car, and her head kept jolting to what TJ assumed was the front seat. "What's a tia?" Ayo asked. "It means auntie in Portuguese. TJ explained. Well, in Spanish too. Heat rushed his face as he thought back to one of his first conversations with Manny, where he had mixed up the two languages.
That's enough, young lady,
a gruff voice said on the other end.
Just let your folks know you're all right, then hang up. Sorry, sir. Of course, sir,
Manny replied quickly.
Wait, I'm looking up what happened in New York right now.
Ayo's eyes drifted somewhere off screen. A soft light fell over his face, winking in and out. TJ caught flashing images of the Times Square destruction in his friend's glasses.
Damn, girl. You did all that?
TJ flipped open his laptop too and searched up blackout in Times Square. Hundreds of results popped up about New York City suing some movie production for unsafe filming conditions. Manny explained in a murmur that the story was just a cover for what really happened. Is that why you didn't text me back? TJ asked. Ayo snorted and TJ realized his voice had cracked with nervousness. Leave it to Ayo to point out TJ's shortcomings.
What?
Manny said with a pinched brow.
Oh, right. Yeah, all morning there have been all this weird stuff happening. First in my room with my Oya coins, then in this video store I go to. The TVs were acting up and they were singing a song with my name in it. Then at the farmer's market, the eggplant started wiggling around and... That's enough, Miss Martinez.
That gruff voice came again.
You can speak with your parents at headquarters.
The line went dead. Well, that sucks, TJ said to Ayo, who filled the screen in place of Manny. Why do you think Oya wanted to destroy Times Square like that? Ayo shrugged.
Maybe she's not a fan of their hot dogs. I can't even pretend I know anything about the Orishas after that stuff with Josh and Eshu.
Is Manny gonna be in trouble?
Nah, she'll be fine. It's the UCMP guys who might be in trouble for allowing her to stay on the phone for so long. Let's pull up some posts on Evo and see what's really going on.
TJ fired up his search engine again. He and Ayo went through article after article about what really happened. Many of the shady sites even mentioned Manny's full legal name, unlike the more official reports, which only use words like alleged diviner child and unconfirmed youth. After a short while, TJ thought he heard something boiling, but his bedroom was on the second floor, nowhere near the kitchen. He sat up from his desk, grabbing his phone with Ayo on his screen, and searched for the strange noise. His brief investigation led him to the shadow under his bed where a wooden bowl was hidden between his old baseball cleats and a long-forgotten Star Wars Lego set. Ayo? TJ said to his phone. Are you calling me on that water bowl Adeyemi gave us after camp?
No,
he said, his attention still locked on his research on the other end.
You should answer it, though. Adeyemi's probably got an update about New York.
TJ pulled the water bowl from under his bed to find bubbles materializing at its base from nothing. Then the bubbles shot up and combined like a waterfall in reverse. Slowly, a human face manifested within the murky liquid. But the image didn't show the familiar aged face of Elder Adeyemi, but someone else. Dude! TJ exclaimed, heart racing. I think it's Manny! The dingy water had definitely formed around a familiar mass of hair. Even though her face was faded and rippling, TJ knew it was her. TJ? Her voice came through like she was underwater. TJ, can you hear me?
Oh, whoa.
Ayo said from TJ's phone.
Those UCMP guys let you use a water bowl?
She trailed off, looking to the side. TJ only then realized she had been lowering her voice. Not exactly. So what then? TJ asked. They, sort of put me in a holding cell until my parents get here. Said my ashe could combust or something. I'm calling from a sink in here and... Her face turned around and they saw nothing but her back. Did you just say something? A muffled yet gruff voice came from the water bowl. It sounded the same as that officer from the car before. Yeah, I talk to myself sometimes, Manny lied. Sorry, I'll keep it down.
All right then,
the man said.
I sent 2 of my people to locate your parents. Our files say your mom works at that Puerto Rican spot on 5th Ave. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Manny answered.
All right then. Sorry about putting you in there. Boss's orders. If you need anything, just shout.
Will do. Manny waited a few moments before she turned around and faced TJ and Ayo again, and in hushed tones said, Sorry about that, guys.
How the hell are you using a sink?
Ayo asked straight away.
A sink has no magical properties, and that jail cell probably has anti-magic enchantments.
I don't know. Everything about my Ashe right now feels different. But I can barely see y'all on the other end. So what happened? TJ asked. Did Oya try to communicate with you? TJ was sure if this was only 2 months ago, he would have been joking. But ever since they crossed over to the Aqua Realm and realized one of their fellow campers was an Orisha, saying something like, Oya tried communicating with you, wasn't all that far-fetched. Yes, she did, Manny said. I was walking back home when I saw her in a window. A sharp tickle went down TJ's spine. Seeing an Orisha in their own realm was one thing, but to see them in reality, in the mortal realm, that must have been mad dope. And a little scary. You said she gave you a message for me? She spoke with you too? TJ asked, his skin growing hot with nerves. Word must have gone around in the Orisha plane. What she said was all jumbled up. I don't know what happened. One moment she was inside me, literally inside me, like some of the rumors other diviners are talking about. Then she said some stuff about traveling to the sky realm, finding her husband Shango, and something else I've been trying to remember. It all happened so fast. I couldn't process everything. But she sounded worried, like she was speaking mad fast.
She mentioned Shango?
Now Ayo was fully awake, sitting up straight in his bed. After all, Shango was his primary Orisha alignment.
Oya didn't say nothing else? She just lost connection real quick, just like that?
I'm surprised she connected as long as she did, honestly. Manny trailed off, pausing a beat to peek over her shoulder. It was another moment before she turned around to indicate the all clear. My brother said the record someone connected with an Orisha was only a minute at most, TJ said. Sounds like Oya was with you for, what, a whole half an hour?
Hold up.
Ayo said.
What's this business about a movie production gone wrong and you being a child actor?
Mad Clouded saw me, yo. I sorta flew, you know? When Oya latched onto me and all that. But when her voice went away, I fell to the ground and hit my head. Next thing I know, I'm being carried away by dudes in baseball caps and vests. They say they were part of the UCMP, but they kept flashing those permits at the cops and saying they were shooting a movie scene. No way that worked, TJ said. Too many people would have seen you. Too many cameras.
Nah, she's right.
Another bright flicker fell across Ayo's face.
Damn, those UCMP officials were crazy fast. All the videos uploaded are doctored. They made it look like Manny was hung up by wires and all that.
TJ brought his laptop to the ground with his water bowl and opened a new tab on his web browser to see an article of his own. Sure enough, in a shaky cam video from someone's phone, it appeared as though Manny was part of a special effect gone wrong.
Miss Martinez?
The gruff voice came again. Manny's eyes went wide and she twisted around again.
Do you take your coffee with sugar?
No, thank you, she squeaked. Again, she waited a little while before continuing. Okay, we gotta end this. This guy's gonna catch me.
Okay. We'll wrap it up right now. Damn. The Sky Realm, huh?
Ayo pressed a hand into his chin.
If we had to drown to get to the Aqua Realm, I can only imagine what we gotta do to get to the Sky Realm. Skydive off Pearl Towers and hope we don't go splat?
TJ rubbed the back of his afro. What does Oya even want us to do there anyway? And why? All I know is that we need to find Shango, Manny said quickly in a low whisper. That's all she could tell me, really. She said you needed to watch out for Manny coughed on her words. She clearly wanted to say Olokun, but her throat didn't want to cooperate. Ah, you know who I mean. What? No, I didn't bring a water bowl in, sir. I'm just talking to myself, like I said. It was probably smarter if Manny waited until she got home to call TJ and Ayo, but TJ knew she must have wanted to get it all out as soon as possible. Hell, if some Orisha came knocking at TJ's door, he'd call Manny straight away too. Manny's face completely disappeared from the hanging waterfall in his bowl. TJ could hear some rustling in the background and a deep voice, who sounded wholly unconvinced. Let's see who you're talking to, young lady. It's just my parents! It's just my parents, I swear! Before Manny could protest, a new face filled the waterfall before TJ. With Manny, he at least had an idea of what she looked like so he could fill in the gaps. With this UCMP officer, all he saw was a murky blob of a man. Hello? This is Lieutenant Chu. Who am I speaking with? Is this Mr. and Mrs. Martinez? A heavy silence hung in the air, pierced only by the slight bubbling within the water bowl. It was Ayo who spoke up first, though, clearing his throat.
Why, Jess, my name's Mr. Martinez.
He tried to deepen his voice, but it was barely passable. TJ hoped the quality of the call was garbled enough to not reveal Ayo's terrible impression. And Mrs. Martinez, is that you I see in this sink? The man asked. That was a problem. TJ was a terrible actor, and to top it off, for the past 2 weeks, his voice was going through fits of cracks. Worse yet, he looked nothing like Manny's mom. Quickly, he grabbed for the first thing in reach, a t-shirt. Then he wrapped it around his head like a headscarf, took a deep breath, and put on an exaggerated falsetto. Jess, I'm Mrs. Martinez. He could practically hear the eye roll from Ayo and Manny through the phone and bowl, respectively. Who is this really? The man asked. TJ went on, trying his best not to break character. I am so offended. This is Mrs. Martinez.
Can you please put my daughter back on that magical bowl of yours?
Ayo added.
We are so worried.
There was a brief pause before the man said, Shuezokai. Then the hanging waterfall in the bowl crashed down and disappeared, splashing TJ in the face. That had been the first time TJ experienced a magical water phone being literally slammed into his face. He definitely preferred getting hung up on the old-fashioned way. Chapter 3. Hello, Threshold, my old friend. Hello? Hello? TJ said in his horrendous mom's voice as he wiped water from his face. Are you still there, sir?
He hung up on you, Teej.
Ayo groaned.
Remind me to never let you audition for any roles at Aoife's theater classes.
Hey, you didn't give me a choice. I should have been Mr. Martinez. I've actually met him.
Yeah. Whatever.
Ayo waved him away on his phone screen. Now he was out of bed and sitting at his very expensive sci-fi looking desk.
So what are we gonna do about this Sky Realm stuff and Olokun?
I don't know, but we knew that stuff about Olokun already. TJ glanced at the Eshu painting on his wall, then at the tattoo symbol on his forefinger. Wait, Eshu! Let's try and summon him. In the Aqua Realm, he said we could call him any time, at any threshold.
Well, shit, man. Get over to your door and try it out.
TJ propped his phone on his laptop, then placed his laptop on his desk so Ayo could still see him. He kissed his fingers, set them to his bedroom door, and prayed to Eshu. I praise the mysteries and power of Eshu. You are the messenger of Oludumare, the Orishas and the ancestors. You are the owner of the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. Grant me long life. Grant me peace. Grant me elevation of my consciousness. Grant me the ability to use my own hands. Eshu, I salute you. Ashe.
Ashe.
Aya repeated on the phone. Nothing happened. Only the bell of the elote man outside TJ's window sounded off. Spicy elote and candy, he called out. Then in Spanish he said, Elotes! Elotes! TJ walked over and closed the window. The elote man was indeed rolling with his cart and ringing his bell like a madman. TJ couldn't concentrate with all that noise. He shuffled back over to his door and did his prayer again. This time, the elote man got even louder, like he was trying to be heard through the closed window. TJ closed his eyes and tried to concentrate hard, but no familiar voice of Eshu came. No sensation. Nothing. TJ at least expected to feel some sort of rush going through his arms and legs. So, is something supposed to happen? TJ asked Ayo, who was still on the screen of his phone, which was propped up on his laptop.
What are you asking me for?
You're the expert on this Ashe and Orisha stuff. That's your whole thing in this group. I'm the battery pack, the blood. You're the CPU, the brains. And Manny's the... TJ couldn't think of what Manny was.
Motherboard?
Ayo offered. Don't ever tell her we said that.
Deal.
TJ couldn't really tell from across the room. Plus, Ayo's screen was really dim, but he was almost certain the man-bun wonder was fixing him with a confused grimace.
Bruh, that's how you really think of us?
It sounds hella dorky when I say it out loud like that, but yeah. You're the smart one.
First, thanks for the compliment. Shit never gets old when this,
he pointed to his forehead,
is appreciated for all its glory. Second, yes, that's goofy. That's goofy as all hell, man.
So, TJ picked his phone back up. As I was saying, what am I supposed to do here? Ayodeji shrugged.
I don't know. Pray real hard? Look, it took us doing that whole-ass ritual to manifest Olosa at camp. But we had the power of an Orisha helping us.
And I'm an Orisha.
I thought they said you weren't an Orisha.
Well, something in between, something similar. It was still undecided what TJ actually was. Between the elders he encountered, the magical creatures he ran into, and the great deities themselves, no one had an answer for what was so special about him, why he was so different. A lot of the Orishas were indeed human at one point, venerated and deified after their passing. But there was no one like TJ who could do the things he did, like crossing over into the Orisha plane and back again with his memories intact. Manny and Aya remember nothing from the Aqua Realm, only faint feelings and images in their dreams. Ayodeji sighed, rubbed his eyes, and flicked on a light. His screen rocked around, showing an entire wall full of books, scrolls, and Nigerian masks. He basically had a whole-ass library off the side of his room. After a moment, he wiggled his fingers and a book appeared in his hands.
Elder Isola,
he said to the book.
Pull up the page on Eshu rituals.
The book in his hand flipped to its table of contents and answered,
What would you like to have me read to you today, Mr. Oyelowo? Eshu's offering should work.
The pages on the book flipped and stopped near what must have been an opening chapter. Then Ayo read,
One must first ask Eshu before all other Orishas, blah, blah. Eshu opens and closes all doors, blah, blah. Oh, here you go. Eshu's offerings are vices like sweets, rum, tobacco, toys, and spicy food.
Well, that's not hard. My mom is making pepper soup right now. Give me a second. TJ started off, but Ayo stopped him.
That stuff ain't gonna work by itself, though. We need to do another big ritual and whatnot.
TJ peeked out his window and up through the clouds. The moon will be full again in a couple more weeks. Maybe we can try something then?
Maybe. Ugh. But I want to talk to him right now.
Io groaned.
How can Eshu say all that stuff about thresholds and not give you a sign? I don't want to have to wait until we get to Ifa Academy.
Yeah. TJ echoed Io's own grunt. But what can we do right now?
Right. But at least now we have direction, unlike at camp.
Io whistled long and slow before collapsing back onto his bed.
Man, and here I thought nothing could top this summer. It took us months to mess around with the Orishas. Now they're coming to us before term even starts.
Chapter 4. A Withering Worry. Oya communicating with Manny? That was more than nuts. Or maybe it was totally normal in this new world of Orishas coming up to you while you're taking an afternoon stroll. What was it like for ancient diviners? TJ wondered. Did warriors wake up for battle to consult Ogun directly before hitting the field? Did fishermen brave the seas by saying sup to Yemoja, who just hung out along the coast? TJ stared at his laptop screen, still searching through all the stories about Manny. He even flipped open Evocation, which often had authentic information about magical goings-on, not the doctored stuff from Divination Today. But even it had nothing definitive about the Times Square debacle. Sure, they mentioned Manny by name a few times, but there was nothing about Oya or Shango or the Sky Realm. So TJ pulled out the wooden bowl from under his bed again, filled it with his own spirit water this time, and said the name, Elder Adeyemi. The water in the bowl remained still. Then it occurred to TJ that it was early morning in Nigeria. Perhaps the elder was sleeping like Ayo had been. After a few minutes, TJ was about to put his water bowl away and try again later, when the liquid inside bubbled. Like a boiling pot, each burst of water shot up, and then little waterfalls in reverse sprang up until the mass of water all met as one. For TJ, each tiny eruption came with a cloud of blue mist that only he could see. Unlike other diviners, he could actually see the inner workings of Ashe at play as a physical thing. Eventually, the streaks of water settled from miniature white caps to a clear and translucent image of a face, much more sharp than what he saw with Manny. With a slender jaw, kind eyes, and a grace that could be felt even through the water communication, Elder Adeyemi smiled that royal smile at him from the bowl. Tomori Jomeloju. I didn't think you'd call me so soon on my personal stream. Sorry, ma'am, but you said I should call whenever anything happened with the Orishas. Did you hear about New York already? Yes, she said calmly. I just got into headquarters here, in New Ile-Ife. It seems Manuela has had a visit from Oya, correct? Yeah, and Oya had a message for me. Something about getting to the Sky Realm and speaking to Shango? Ayo and I tried calling Eshu, but nothing happened. Adeyemi pressed her fingers to her lips thoughtfully. A long moment hung between them, and TJ wondered if the water call had frozen until he noticed a wrinkle twitching on the elder's forehead. You've told no one of this, yes? No, ma'am. Not even your parents? No, ma'am. Good. Keep it that way. I'm sure your parents are trustworthy. But if we have the smallest of leaks, the keepers could know what we know? Exactly. The room seemed to darken then, probably just a cloud covering the sun. But the darkness brought with it a load TJ wasn't sure he could carry. It had only been 2 weeks since he and Elder Adeyemi had agreed to keep information like this between the two of them, so the guilt of keeping things from his family hadn't quite settled. To avoid Adeyemi's wise eyes, TJ glanced down at his hand instead. The faint symbol of the Eshu tattoo pulsated a little. It's a wonder what Oya wants with you, Elder Adeyemi said.
If she says you must summon her husband, it must be most dire. The old stories say those two weren't on the best of terms before the great separation between the Orishas and mortals. What do you think, young one?
TJ still wasn't used to being asked questions like this. Elder Adeyemi often treated him like an equal in conversation, rather than a student. I don't know, ma'am. They're both associated with the sky. I was reading in one of my books that besides the great Oludumare, Shango and Olokun are in contention for most powerful Orishas. My bad. Most destructive, not most powerful. Elder Adeyemi nodded in approval at TJ's correction.
These are my thoughts as well. Oya must not think we'll succeed, which is fair. We are only human, and Shango would be a great help. As you know from your summer stories.
Her voice was accusatory.
Water magic does poorly in the face of lightning.
Right. Good point. TJ tried to play it off like he knew that already. To cover up his shaking voice, he changed the subject. On the topic of magic, Manny called us from a sink at the New York headquarters. Ayo said she shouldn't have been able to with the anti-magic stuff in that place. Manny said her ashe felt different. Again, Elder Adeyemi took her time to reply.
This is not unheard of. She was mounted by Oya directly. She may have retained some of the Orishas' primal ashe afterward. Quite dangerous. Very dangerous. From these reports we're going through here, it would seem Oya only connected for a few seconds. Any more, and Manny could have gone into cardiac arrest.
TJ gulped and tried to force out the image of Manny convulsing on a New York City street and then not moving at all. To avoid the thought, he turned away from the water bowl to his laptop screen, which flashed a headline about the Keepers. Apparently, Olugbala, their leader, also known as Mr. Bolawe, had said the Times Square debacle was no debacle at all, but something that should be celebrated among diviners if the Orishas were trying to call out to them. Any news on Bolawe and the Keepers? TJ asked, still staring at the article on his laptop.
None yet.
Elder Adeyemi frowned deeply. She always did that when TJ brought up Bolawe. They were both deceived by him, but the betrayal cut deeper for her. TJ only knew him for a few months. Elder Adeyemi had known the man since long before TJ was even born.
That said, everyone is keeping an eye out for Olugbala and his keepers.
She rarely called Bolawe by his name these days.
Sleep well, Tomori Jomeloju. I'll see you when you touch down in Nigeria. The UCMP has us all working double on this Manuela Martinez situation.
TJ hadn't expected her to cut the conversation so short, but that had become par for the course whenever the topic of the terrorist group cropped up. TJ had noticed the subtle changes of Elder Adeyemi's tone and facial expressions, which were dismissive at best and condescending at worst. Of course, TJ piped up. Thanks for taking my call, ma'am. I'll see you soon. With that, the water fell back into the bowl, and Elder Adeyemi's face was gone. This time, TJ did not get splashed. Oh, shoot, TJ thought. I forgot to ask if Manny would be in trouble. Ayo said Manny would be okay, but Ayo's idea of okay differed greatly from TJ's. The wealthy kid might have gotten into mischief and laughed about it later, but Manny didn't have his family or his money backing her. TJ really hoped Manny didn't get into any trouble over calling him. In fact, He was almost certain there was a magical law about impersonating different people the way he and Ayo had. Or was that only when a diviner stole someone's appearance, not just their voice? What was he thinking? His and Ayo's imitations were terrible. No one would come after them after those performances. A week and a few days went by and TJ didn't get any calls or visits from government officials. Maybe Elder Adeyemi had put in a good word. What worried him, however, was that there had been no calls from Manny at first. For that first week, he only got intermittent texts from Manny saying this mystical organization or that magical institution wanted to speak with her, asking 1,000,000,001 questions and putting her through endless tests. It wasn't until a day before it was time to travel to Ifa Academy that TJ could have a proper FaceTime with her. Manny showed off her school uniform, a similar long tunic as his own, though hers was wider at the bottom. Not unshapely, but modest enough for school. And the stripes going down her front were maroon and gold on one side for Oya and blue with white on the other side for Yamoja. And my mom said she found a connecting flight through New York, TJ had said after Manny's fashion show ended on their video call. Your flight number is 1314, yeah?
Yep.
Manny beamed. They spoke excitedly about their upcoming reunion late into that night, and TJ couldn't help but fall asleep with a smile when they did eventually hang up the video call. Hours later. Chapter 5. A Tale to Lose. The next day, on the Friday morning of TJ's flight, Mom and Dad laid out a feast with one of their famous tag team cuisines. Mom with her Nigerian fried yams, plantains, and eggs. Dad with his American oatmeal, sausage, and power smoothie. Sorry, the smoothies don't got no peaches in them, Dad apologized as he chewed away at a smoky sausage link. There weren't none left. Tunde pointed his fork in TJ's direction. That's because he keeps eating them all. Gonna be better once he gets up out the house for school and I get to have some again. Finally. Really, TJ? Mom tilted her head. I thought you hated peaches, baby. TJ shrugged. It was true. He had a new craving for the sweeter fruit lately. That's just a side effect of the young growth spurt, Dad said. Dio gobbled up them peaches too at that age, remember? Mom ran her fingers through TJ's afro with a measuring squint of her eyes. My goodness. You might end up being the tallest of us all. I'm telling you, Dad said. Boy's gonna be 6'2" at the least. Too bad it's against the rules for you diviners to play in the NBA. All diviners and other magical peoples across the world were banned from participating in professional competitions. It would be an unfair advantage when many young magic users could just float balls into a hoop from half court if they wanted to. Maybe we should get you into a crossover team instead, Dad forked another link. Your friend from New York plays that game, right? TJ cringed with a clench of his shoulders. Sure, crossover was fun, but he was always tripping over his awkwardly long feet. How about we focus on making sure he passes all his classes this year? Mom came to the rescue. Then we can talk about his career as a crossover player with his tall self. TJ didn't really feel all that tall. It was hard to, with Olokun's towering figure still looming in his mind. But soon he'd be back with his friends. Manny would know what to do about Oya, and by now, Ayo would have built out some scheme to get in contact with Eshu. A buzz came at TJ's side. He pulled out his phone to see an update, which read, Echo Atlantic's doomsday in 25 weeks, 3 days, 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 5 seconds. After breakfast, Dad got behind the wheel and drove them all to LAX. TJ was not looking forward to the actual trip to Ifa Academy. First, there was the flight to New York, which was 5 hours alone. Then there was the long trip between New York to Lagos, Nigeria, which was 3 times the distance. And apparently, once they landed, there was a multi-hour drive from Lagos to New Ile-Ife after that. The one silver lining of it all was that TJ would travel most of the journey alongside Manny. "What are you smiling at, simp?" Tunde asked in the seat next to TJ. "Nothing," TJ returned as he hid his smile under a bit lip. As they got on the highway, TJ wondered if there was an advanced placement test he can take so he could travel through portals like the adults did on their own. A glint caught TJ's eye from outside the window. A car beside them kept perfect pace with them. Like eerily perfect pace. And the driver, who wore a cap with a familiar symbol, had a camera in his thin hands. Both his hands. TJ blinked twice, rubbed his eyes, and blinked again. The car was driving itself, yet the man was not in some new age self-driving car. He was in some clunker straight out of the 80s. Unless he was some sort of mechanic who souped up old cars with modern technology, that was definitely not a regular old person snooping around. Mom?" TJ trailed off. Mom turned with a wide smile. "Yes, baby? Did you forget something at home? We can still go back real quick." "No, I think there's a diviner following us." TJ thumbed out of his window. Mom whipped her head in the direction of TJ's point. "What the? Who is that?" The man in the other car clicked away at his camera shutter with no shame. Mom started to roll the window down, but it jammed a quarter way down. "Sorry, Yejide," Dad said. "I still need to fix that." Mom waved a dismissive hand. "Epo pupa ebile, mokepeo ma boa sodomi." A slimy substance coated the window magically, and it slid straight down, letting in a rush of air. "Remind me why you asked me to fix it in the first place again?" Dad grinned with a roll of his eyes in the rearview mirror. Ignoring him, Mom called out over the roar of the wind. "Who are you? What do you want? What if a clouded sees you? You need to have your hands on the wheel, idiot!" Whenever Mom said idiot with that distinct Niger accent, it always sent chills down TJ's spine. The man's eyes shot wide, and he put a hand to his steering wheel. Now that TJ got a better look at his hat and the design on it, he recognized it as Eshu's symbol, the same one that had been tattooed on TJ's finger. They were on a wide street, so they had a lot of room, but with Los Angeles traffic, that could change at any moment. Even if they were in a bumper-to-bumper jam, that might not have deterred this reporter dude. "The Eshu Messenger Press just has a few questions for the boy," the man shouted back. "Then send us a bloody email. Don't go telling us through the streets." "I'm in my rights, Mrs. Young. Public spaces, public pictures." "Iranu, you also need to abide by clouded laws. And I bet that car isn't registered, is it?" For the first time, the man lowered his camera, his expression caving with embarrassment. "What you about to do?" Dad asked as Mom spun her finger. TJ could see the ashe of wind magic wrap its way around the steering wheel. "I'm going to show you how to lose a tail." "Yes!" Tunde hopped in his seat next to TJ. "Let's go, Mom!" "Am I allowed to help too? I can bust that dude's wheels. Or maybe I'll ice his brakes." "No, you sit back and watch your mother work." Even if Tunde wanted to help, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. Using wind magic, Mom thrusted the car forward faster on the open road, which forced TJ, Tunde, and Dad back in their seats like they were on a roller coaster. Tunde put his hands in the air. "Yes! This is so hype! Yeet his car, Mom! Yeet him! Yeet him!" TJ could barely move his chin, so he could see the car next to him matching their speed. But then, suddenly, the reporter's car slowed. TJ forced his chin to the side to see white smoke pluming from the hood of the old clunker. Were it not for TJ's ability to see Ashe, he wouldn't have noticed the water magic that rushed through the other car's engine. The reporter certainly didn't see it coming as he banged on his steering wheel to keep his vehicle moving. After a moment of pounding as his car crawled to a snail's pace, the man pulled out a magic staff in his car and vanished the water away. But the damage was already done. Mom pulled away just as more traffic showed up ahead of them. Her trick on the reporter would have worked if it wasn't for the red light, Dad shouted in terror. Mom shouted back, I can beat it! Run through the yellow, Mom! Tunde punched a fist forward. Run through the yellow! There's a camera, Dad reminded her. We can't afford the ticket. Ugh! Mom groaned, and she slammed on the brakes. Everyone got thrown forward. Invisible airbags, well, literal airbags in this case, saved everyone from severe whiplash. Mom was known for her water magic, but she was pretty killer with wind too, apparently. Very slowly, the reporter pulled up next to them, his car coughing fumes. That was a close call there, Mrs. Young. What was that you were saying about the clouded seeing us? All those theatrics you just pulled wouldn't help your case. Pretty dangerous, wouldn't you say? The reporter didn't actually sound all that bothered, and TJ took that to mean he would have been safe no matter what. Mom's nose flared through the side mirror as they waited for the light to turn green. TJ Young, the reporter said, his camera back in his hands. What do you know about the movie production in New York last week? We just want an official comment from someone connected to this source. The light turned green. Even if TJ wanted to answer, he couldn't. This time, TJ jolted to the side instead of backward. Mom had forced the car down an alley, but it didn't work. The reporter was still right behind them, as though his engine hadn't suffered any water damage. TJ's Ashe vision flared to reveal that the reporter's car wasn't rolling along because of the engine, but because of wind magic rotating his tires forward. How is he still driving? Mom gritted. His engine's dead, but he's using Oya's wind to push him forward. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Honey? Dad asked, clutching his seatbelt, even though they were going much slower down the narrow path. Why you got us going down this alley? So no one will see this. Mom made a fist and then spread her fingers wide. A loud pop sounded behind them. TJ and Tunde both turned to see ice spikes had lodged themselves into the man's tires, bringing the vehicle to a more definitive halt. That's how you lose a tail, honey. Mom gave Dad control of the car again, lifting the wind magic she had set around the steering wheel. Dad gawked over his shoulder. There ain't much traffic round here, but damn, Yejide. Someone's gonna notice all that ice. It'll melt by the time anyone comes looking. Mom smiled and blew some frost from her fingertips. She made it look simple, but the precision of the magic she had just used was master tier. From the little reading TJ did, he knew that ice magic was hard enough on its own, let alone using it on rotating tires like that. Mom, Mom, Mom! Tunde clapped with each utterance. We gotta call you the Ice Queen! The short chase clearly left Tunde with an adrenaline rush, but TJ was more on his father's wavelength. Even after fighting against Orishas, Mom's magical rage hit a bit different, and it left TJ's stomach way back at that red light. Not long after, they pulled up to American Airlines, where Mom gathered all of TJ's belongings with the speed of an eager concierge. TJ barely had time to hug Dad goodbye or throw a rebuttal back at Tunde after he said, "Don't get kicked out of the academy like you did at camp," before Mom had grabbed TJ's wrists and pulled him away. He couldn't do anything but let himself be dragged along toward the terminal doors. Mom's tugging was apparently for good reason, because a woman with another one of those Eshu Messenger press hats rushed up to them with a video camera in hand. Chike Ogunseye from the Messenger Press. TJ Young, good to see you again. Is it true your fellow co-star, Manuelo Martinez, was part of that fiasco in New York? Can you tell us what really happened at Times Square? TJ had met the woman once before, only a few months ago, in fact, when she had spied on him in his own backyard, masquerading as living poison ivy. How dare you, Mom gritted. Here of all places, with all these clouded. You should be ashamed of yourself. These reporters were insane, TJ thought. You lost one just to have another on your tail. How did they even know what terminal he and his family would be at? A security guard near the sliding double doors moved forward. Sorry, ma'am. These tabloid people do this all the time. Come on in. They can't bother you once you get through TSA. Other travelers stopped and gawked, whispering to each other. Most of them stared straight at TJ. He thought he could make out one of them say, "Oh, yeah. I think he's that one kid from... And then the other answered, that one show on that thing, right? That was one thing about living in Los Angeles. Anyone, literally anyone, could be a celebrity. And at the moment, the crowd gathering around was convincing themselves TJ was some child star. It didn't help that the reporter kept asking questions about the movie production the UCMP used as a cover story for Manny and Oya in New York. Even as the security guard ushered them into the terminal and away from the questions and crowds, a few younger kids, likely at the behest of their parents, asked TJ for his autograph. TJ got through his fourth sloppy signing and third awkward photo before Mom checked his bag and took him through TSA. Grumbling under her breath, she said, "These reporters are playing fast and loose with the code of concealment. They're getting bolder every day." TJ knew the COC was a worldwide law imposed on all magical peoples. The rules and regulations about not showing one's magical self to the non-magical community. But the reporter had said nothing about any mystical business. Just like the official reports, she kept up the charade of the movie production. She never asked directly if TJ knew anything about why Manny flew a few feet in the air while shouting Oya's name at the top of her lungs. Did Dio have to deal with stuff like this? TJ asked as they approached the end of the TSA line near the metal detectors. Sometimes. Remember that year when that man kept slipping on wet surfaces behind us? How could TJ forget? That year there had been some guy who kept slipping in puddles all around the airport. An airport worker would always come and help him up, and a few moments later the same thing would happen. Over and over again. Wait, TJ said. That was you? You always denied it when we asked. Yes, well, I didn't want your little brother getting any ideas. What about me? You were older and better behaved, and I'd have probably jumped out of my flats if you managed something like that back then. That one hit TJ pretty hard. After all the craziness during the summer, he'd almost forgotten how much Mom wanted his Ashe to manifest, only to be disappointed every time. At least now he did have magic, so that disappointment had gone away. Anyway, that Chica woman is lucky that security guard came up, Mom winked. Or else, I would have had a nice little puddle waiting for her too. Chapter 6. Creeper in Terminal 4. The 5-hour flight was easy. No reporters, no one asking for autographs, though one guy with a mole over his lip kept getting up to go to the bathroom, making TJ wonder, 1, if he was a reporter as well, and 2, how much he had to drink. The guy did nothing wrong exactly. He didn't even look TJ's way. But TJ was on edge after the morning chase and the shenanigans at the airport. "Don't worry yourself, honey," Mom told him when they were somewhere over Colorado. "If you can't take your mind off the coming term, you can brush up on some of your prayers. I know you still have trouble with Olokun's hymns." TJ didn't have any trouble with those prayers. He just didn't know how he felt about empowering the Orisha through worship when he needed to figure out how to stop him. Plus, it felt like any time he prayed, it was like Olokun could see him, reminded of the silly mortal boy who made a deal he'd never be able to keep. "And I know you're still trying to figure out what's going on with Oya and Manuela," Mom said gently. "Don't worry yourself about that either. Elder Adeyemi and the other counselors are sorting all that out. Your friend gave them everything she knows. Unless..." She nudged her shoulder into his. "There's something else we should know about?" "No, nothing," TJ shook his head. "But, yeah, studying. I should do that." "Yeah, good idea, Mom." TJ was A-okay with steering the subject in another direction. So he took out one of his school books and pretended to study the rest of the way until they landed in New York. They arrived and exited their plane without so much as a whiff of another reporter. With how persistent the ones in Los Angeles were, TJ assumed one in New York would buy a plane ticket just to get close to him and Mom. But no one came with their cameras or questions. Instead, he and Mom were met with that old-fashioned New Yorker indifference from those they passed, as they made their way to the air train. Mom pointed out the skyline of New York City as they transferred from the domestic terminal to the international terminal. "Oh, a few years back there was an incident near the Statue of Liberty," she murmured to him. "Some crazy mage from France tried to bring it all to life to attack the city. My cousin, who works for the UCMP branch out here, helped stop that mess." TJ looked around to make sure no one was listening. But there was only one couple on the far end of the train, along with that same guy with the mole over his lip. Plus, Mom kept her voice very low. Even as they dipped into a tunnel, which blocked out the skyscrapers in the distance, Mom had more stories. TJ listened to keep his mind off of the nerves building in his gut as Mom described an indigenous fairy outbreak near the Brooklyn Bridge when she was a kid, and a potential zombie outbreak near Central Park that was mitigated in the 1980s, right around the time of Michael Jackson's Thriller video. "New York goes through that kind of madness every few years. The stuff with Manuela was nothing in comparison," Mom explained as they came to a halt on the air train. The international terminal was far busier than the domestic one. Travelers zipped this way and that way between the high ceilings and wide halls. Despite the large space, it didn't seem like anyone had room to maneuver with all the fancy art fixtures and vendors selling last-minute postcards. There was even a man playing a piano in the middle of one of the spacious rooms. American flags were strung up from just about every ceiling, never letting you forget which country you were in. TJ had counted his dozenth flag when a thunder of footsteps clamored behind him, followed by a very loud and stretched out, "TJ!" Before he knew what was going on, TJ was wrapped in a hug so tight his arms were pinned around his waist. A bundle of excitement had him locked in place, and a mass of curly hair appeared in his peripherals. "Manny?" TJ gasped and hugged back awkwardly. Manny let go, beaming and brushing her hair from her face. "God damn, yo! Were you always this tall?" "It's the young growth spurt." TJ wasn't exactly feeling confident, but a hint of smugness still edged in. A horde of butterflies was attacking his stomach at the moment. Manny was excited to see him, and that made him, well, get all giddy and whatnot. "Hello, Manuela," Mom said with a knowing smile. Manny gave her a small wave. Hey, Mrs. Young. My mom and dad are right here, Mr. Martinez said, catching up with his daughter. A woman who must have been Mrs. Martinez followed closely behind him. Mr. Martinez had very dark skin, which contrasted starkly against his solid white beard and hair. And even if she didn't introduce herself, TJ would have known who Mrs. Martinez was instantly. Just like Manny, she had thick coils sprouting from her head, though most of it was covered under a green and yellow headscarf. The moment she saw TJ, she took off, Mrs. Martinez said with bright eyes. Mom put a hand to her heart. Aw, how cute. Manny hid her face between her lion's mane. Well, it's nice to see you again, Zay. And good to meet you too, Renata. My goodness, TJ. Mr. Martinez measured his height against TJ's own. Are you taller than me already? During the summer, Zay kept saying TJ should be in the NBA someday, Mrs. Martinez added. Something about what she said made Mr. Martinez perk up. Ooh, basketball. TJ, do you know why those courts are always so wet? TJ shrugged. He knew a dad joke was coming, though. It was Mr. Martinez's specialty. Manny's, too. And sure enough, it was Manny who finished the joke by saying, because the players are always dribbling. Mrs. Martinez rolled her eyes with a smirk, but Manny and her dad laughed out loud. I'll definitely appreciate a break from these two. For the next few moments, as they waited for their flight to be called, the two families chit-chatted about the coming year, the business of what happened in New York, and the prospect of returning Orishas. Manny's parents were particularly interested in what Mom had to say, as they were both non-magical. TJ and Manny tried to get away so they could talk in private, but their parents kept asking them questions. It wasn't until TJ's stomach grumbled loudly that the conversation subsided. Everyone turned to him. TJ only realized then that his stomach growl sounded very similar to a fart. Nervous heat snaked through TJ's neck and shoulders as he blurted, It was my stomach! I swear! A side effect of the young growth spurt? Manny joked with a wink and a jab. Usually that kind of laughter from a girl would make TJ feel bad, but whenever it was Manny busting his chops, he never took offense. Maybe it was the way she chuckled or something. He didn't know. Mom pulled out her purse and handed TJ a few enchanted cowries. Go ahead and get yourself something from the food court, but don't leave the terminal. Mom? TJ eyed the magical money in her hand. Oh, Mom face-palmed. So sorry. Let me get you some proper money. She withdrew a few dollar bills and offered them to TJ. Can I go too, Ma? Manny asked. Mrs. and Mr. Martinez exchanged cheeky grins, then nodded yes. Manny's mom saying, Be back in an hour before the flight leaves. Will do, TJ and Manny said in unison. Shortly after, they strolled along the tall ceiling-high windows, past the gift shops and currency exchanges, until they met a long row of fast food joints, implanted neatly over the linoleum floors. Salt and processed meat slithered into TJ's nose, and his stomach grumbled loudly a second time. Manny grimaced. Uh-oh. Do I need to pinch my nose? Shut up. TJ rolled his eyes with a chuckle. So, how are your memories coming along? Anything new? Manny shook her head. Nothing. The feelings are stronger, though, and I have a lot of dreams about my cousin. But I'm sure they'll come back, eventually. That's not important right now, though. I need to use you for something. That's why I wanted to get away. Is that okay? TJ spread his arms wide. Use me as you wish. Good. Her dimples sunk into her cheek. She grabbed TJ by his wrist and pulled him to a ceiling-high mirror near the food court. She and TJ only had one selfie together, one they took after camp a few weeks prior, so TJ wasn't always used to seeing them side by side. He already knew they got along great. Of course they did. They took on Orishas together. But somehow, he always felt out of place when he saw them together like that. Manny was short, confident, and super cool, while TJ was tall, awkward, and super not cool. So, like I was telling you, Manny said, I could see Oya in reflections. I've been trying to call her back again and nothing is working. But, she said long and stretched as she leaned her forehead into TJ. It was a light touch, barely anything at all, but it sent shockwaves through TJ's arm. But you think my boosting powers will help? Manny smiled. Yep. As I said, use me away. What do I have to do? Help me with the Oya prayer. We'll swap every other line and look directly in the mirror and don't break eye contact. What about everyone else? TJ glanced at the other travelers whipping by with their roller luggage trailing behind them. When Oya showed herself, only I could see her. The clouded people couldn't see anything. TJ wasn't so sure why, but when Manny asked him to do something, he did it. Hesitantly, he said, All right, but I don't know about this. Feels like we're calling Bloody Mary or something. If we get killed, I'm blaming you. Deal. Manny nodded and started the prayer. Oya, please guide and protect me. Open the doors of opportunity by removing obstacles from my path, TJ continued, funneling Manny's ashe through his chest, elevating it. They continued to go back and forth with the prayer, and ashe bubbled forth from TJ's belly, solid and strong. In the mirror, the mists of ashe cast off them like a fog. Maybe this would actually work. Manny squeezed TJ's wrist. She could feel it too, he knew. I am ready for your winds of change, Manny continued, and TJ finished. That brings prosperity to our realm. Ashe. Ashe, Manny said. They waited a moment with wide eyes. TJ imagined a warrior deity with a machete in one hand and a whip in the other looming over their shoulders. But no such image appeared in the mirror. As the seconds passed on, their broad expressions slackened into the dips of frowns. Just like with Eshu, nothing happened. TJ looked pretty devastated, but it was nothing compared to Manny, whose hands were balling into quivering fists. A crowd of travelers spilled up and out from an escalator, a few of them brushing shoulders with TJ. TJ wasn't sure what to say to Manny to make her feel better. It was supposed to be up to him to make this work. But there was one thing he could do to make it all better. Hey, I'm walking over here, TJ said jokingly to a couple speed walking by with their rolling luggage. The woman smiled a bit as she passed, but her husband or boyfriend, who was red in the face, grumbled about his distaste for JFK International. Manny put a hand on TJ's shoulder. Stop. No. Don't do that ever. But that's how they do it in the movies. What? Did I say it wrong? TJ exaggerated his New York accent. Hey, I'm walking over here. Oh, God. Manny covered her face playfully. You're not even walking, yo. TJ changed that and started to step off toward the food court. I said I'm walking over here. I'm walking. Real talk? Manny stepped alongside him. You keep that up and I'm going to plug in my earbuds and act like we're not walking together. Oh, come on. I thought you liked dad jokes. Of course I do, but it's all in the delivery. And you? Manny looked him up and down with judgmental eyes. You need work. Fine. So what do you want to eat? TJ gazed up at the pizzeria nearby. He put on an embellished Super Mario-esque accent, then said, You want a piece of pizza? TJ! This time, Manny blushed under her dimples. TJ didn't mean to actually embarrass her and was beginning to feel a bit guilty for his very lame attempt at being cool, until she said, If you gonna do that, at least don't butcher it. You gotta put your hand up, but like this. She pressed her thumb into her fingers and lifted them in front of her face. Then say, you want a pizza? You gotta extend your words at the end, you know? Damn, she's the best, TJ thought as he caught himself staring at her, a habit he definitely needed to cut out. There you go again, she trailed off, blushing and glancing to the side. Making it weird again? TJ finished for her. All right then, hold up. Let me make it unweird. So, what accents can you do? Outside that one example? None. And don't ask me to do one. Oh, come on. I gotta teach you one too. Let me hear your best Valley girl. After we get pizza, we can tote Scrabble latte with caramel? TJ limped his hand and everything. You see how I did that? You gotta make the end of each sentence sound like a question. Manny rolled her eyes, but as they passed the cafe, she said, in a pretty terrible Cali girl accent, I can't do latte unless it has almond milk sourced from organic farms. Plus, that cafe is totally basic and hella corporate. I only do local. TJ sniggered. Yeah, leave the bad impressions to me. Shut up! I told you I'm whack. Manny smacked TJ along his arm as they shared in their giggles. Then suddenly, Manny tensed. Wait, look behind us, but don't look. You feel me? TJ, the idiot he was, peeked behind his shoulder with absolutely no discretion. TJ, what am I gonna do with you? Manny gritted, though she didn't turn her head, staring forward. You see who I'm talking about though, right? I was looking for a who? I thought I was looking for a what? 2 families behind us, black hat, white logo. You recognize that symbol, don't you? TJ curled to a wall-mounted airport map and pointed. I think the McDonald's is on the other side of the terminal. What do you think? Manny caught on. Yeah, looks like it's on the north side. As they continued their charade, TJ watched as the person described stopped with them, doing his own form of pretend as he ran his fingers through pink and purple I Love New York shirts hanging from a cart. He indeed wore a black hat and TJ definitely recognized a symbol on it. Eshu symbol. The same one on his forefinger. TJ sucked his teeth. Oh, it's another one of those Eshu press reporters. How did you pull him out of the crowd like that? Ever since I got these, Manny gestured to her front and back end. I learned to watch out for creepers, especially in Brooklyn. Glad it's just a reporter, though. It took all of TJ's willpower not to stare down at the these in question, and he cleared his throat. All right, so how do you want to play this? Circle back and tell our parents? Yeah, but we can't be too obvious about it. TJ surveyed the terminal. A large group was approaching them, foreigners being led by a guide holding up a Japanese flag. You thinking what I'm thinking? Cut through and get lost in the crowd? TJ nodded. Cut through and get lost in the crowd. All right. Go. Manny waited until there was a split between the ogling masses. Now! TJ and Manny increased their pace, gliding through old couples and families. TJ bumped a few shoulders and said his sumimasens to the Japanese tourists. Manny split between arms and elbows like nothing. Then TJ realized she was using a subtle bit of Oya's wind magic to gently nudge people out of the way. Tired of bumping knees and getting rude looks, TJ followed behind Manny. This was definitely going to work. There was no way their pursuer could get through the gaps they pressed between. TJ, through that stairwell. It'll break line of sight. Got it. TJ answered as Manny ducked under a vendor selling Statue of Liberty postcards and into the door leading to a musty stairwell. When the door closed behind them, they stared out the slit of the door window to see the man trailing past them. He kept craning his neck and practically tiptoeing for a better view. Now that TJ could get a better look, he noticed a mole over the guy's lip. That's the same dude from my flight, TJ whispered. He kept going to the bathroom. Definitely another reporter. Looks like we shook him, though. Manny pointed to the man who had turned the corner with a light jog. I'd say that's 1 to us, 0 to the creeper. TJ lifted his hand for a high five. Manny reciprocated with a loud smack. All right, let's go straight down here. It'll take us right back to the boarding gates. TJ hurried behind Manny, who was skipping every other step in her rush down the stairs. Then they looped around the railing and went straight for the door below. But when Manny pressed her weight into the door, it didn't move. Shoot! It's locked! TJ caught up, examining the wall for one of those disability push buttons. Instead, what he found was that familiar mist that came to him when Ashe was at play. The door wasn't locked. It was being frosted shut. Even before the telltale crystals of ice spidered from the door lock in reality, TJ could see it like an odd reflecting prism within the magic space of Ashe. Manny, we gotta go back, TJ said, nerves spiking through him. Someone's frosting the door shut. Stop. A meek, slightly reedy Nigerian voice came from behind. I don't want to hurt you. I just have to tell you something. Their pursuer stood at the top of the stairs where they had come from. His hands were out to his side, and he wasn't stepping closer. But the light rimming around him made him look like a living shadow. We don't know anything about a movie scene. TJ clenched his fist, ready for another of Manny's wind gusts. He needed to be ready to empower her if something went south. Talk to the UCMP if you want to know so bad, Manny added, her internal winds already roiling with Ashe. I'm not here about what happened to you at Times Square, Mrs. Martinez. And I already contacted the UCMP. They're no help. I'm here for him. He pointed to TJ, and Manny took a small step in front of her friend. The man spoke very quickly, like he needed to get the words out before he forgot them or something. I just need to tell you that you should not go to Ifa Academy. Your attending is only going to benefit the Keepers and what they're planning. Yeah? And what's that? TJ asked, unconvinced by the story this guy was trying to sell. I don't know what they're planning exactly. I just know that they want you at that place, and that's enough to want you not to be there. He turned wild eyes onto Manny. You? Oya showed herself to you, yes? I believe the Ibeji Orishas are trying to speak to me and my twin sister too. TJ racked his brain. The Ibeji were in reference to the twin Orishas, right? So those rumors about Orishas showing themselves trying to reach out to diviners were right. Sorry, man, but we don't know you. Manny crossed her arms. We're not just gonna take what you say and believe you. The young man put a hand to his heart. My apologies. I am Dele Ogunseye, one of the writers for Evocation's top blogs, The Third Eye. The Third Eye? TJ questioned. Ogunseye? You're related to Chica, that other reporter, aren't you? The one who invaded my backyard as Poison Ivy? If you work for the Eye, what are you doing with that hat? The man didn't have an answer, feeling at the symbol on his baseball cap. Dele, if that was really his name, pulled off his hat, revealing a receding hairline, despite him looking barely out of university. Well, you see, I used to work for the press until a few years ago. The only way I could get to you was by wearing it. I was covering your sister and— Save your lies, TJ cut him off. He tapped Manny on the waist as a signal of attack. We don't have time for this, Tomori Domeloju. They'll be after me at any— A blast echoed through the stairwell and a flash filled TJ's sight. He threw his hand over his face to shield his eyes, which stung with an odd heat. When his vision cleared, the reporter, Dele, was implanted on the wall, a collection of tangled cables binding him to the concrete like a fly caught in a spider's web. TJ's heart raced as footsteps reverberated off the walls and 3 people dressed in navy blue uniforms raced down to secure the reporter. No, the Keepers must be stopped. The Ibeji have the golden chain. They have the golden— A cable gagged Dele around the mouth, and his shouts became muffled grunts. Sorry about that, Mr. Young. One of the uniformed people, a man with a thick beard and thicker dreadlocks, said. His accent sounded a little weird, like a mix of Nigerian and British tonalities. Name's Johnson. Captain Wendell Johnson of the UCMP Security Force. Apologies we didn't get here sooner. TJ frowned. How'd they know to get there at all? Wait, was he being monitored? He wasn't so sure how he felt about that. No, wait. He did know how he felt about that. He didn't like it. Is the UCMP following me? TJ asked, watching as the officers held back the struggling Dele. Captain Johnson murmured, Opami, wasodomi, and an iron staff manifested in his hand. The large man generated a portal made of fire at the top of the stair landing. Of course we are monitoring you, young man, he said matter-of-factly. These are the same uniforms that picked me up at Times Square, Manny murmured at TJ's side. Captain Johnson raised his eyebrows at Manny. Ah, yes, Miss Martinez. You gave Lieutenant Chu quite the headache with that. The captain waved his staff and the fire portal winked out of existence after his cohorts and the reporters stepped through. I'm not supposed to ask, but how did it feel, seeing Oya like that? Manny exchanged an uncertain look with TJ. It was, weird? Of course. Excuse the curiosity. Please don't tell my deputy chief. It's been so long since someone had a connection like that. Anyway, we need to get you back to your parents. Your flight just called for boarding 2 minutes ago. Chapter 7. 2 Peas, 1 Pod. Even as Mom smothered him in kisses, even as Mr. and Mrs. Martinez kept asking if he was okay, TJ couldn't stop thinking about what that reporter had told them. So the keepers wanted him to go to Ifa Academy? Why? How could that benefit them and whatever plans they had? Did they have someone on the inside like Bolawe and they were just waiting for TJ to show up? Everything is all right, Captain Johnson had said. Before coming out of the stairwell, he changed his clothes to look like a regular traveler. Hawaiian shirt with dad jeans and all. We were right there. Please, Mom had said, send Elder Adeyemi our regards. Of course, ma'am. He bowed, his dreadlocks falling over his face. Mom? TJ got in when he had enough space to breathe. Mom, I gotta tell Elder Adeyemi what happened. That reporter, that Dele guy, he said the keepers wanted me to go to Ifa Academy, that they'd stop at nothing to get me there. Does that mean it won't be safe? Keepers? Those radicals from Nigeria? Mr. Martinez asked as he got done smothering Manny. But nothing could breach the academy, Mrs. Martinez insisted with hesitation. That's what my sister, she's a diviner too, that's what she said about the place. She's right. It's impenetrable, Mom added firmly, staring TJ in the eye. Despite everyone's reassuring words, Mr. Martinez held to a more skeptical expression. So they all turned their shoulders to Captain Johnson, who said, Yes, Ifa Academy is locked down tight. The keepers couldn't do anything to it or you, Mr. Young, even if they tried. Besides, he leaned in close, his baritone deeper for it. I have it on good authority that reporter might be associated with the keepers, trying to keep you two students away from the academy.
Last call for Flight 1314.
The flight attendant called out.
Last call for Flight 1314.
TJ and Manny's parents said their final thank yous to Captain Johnson. The UCMP official bowed again and took his leave down the terminal. TJ watched him depart as travelers crossed between them. Eventually, he disappeared into the masses, and TJ suspected he hadn't simply gotten lost in the crowd. As everyone gathered their belongings, Manny whispered, You really think that reporter was telling the truth? It doesn't matter. What we gotta do is get in contact with Eshu. He'll know what to do. He might even know the truth about what's going on with the keepers. How's that been going? Not great. I'll tell you about it later. TJ hushed her, since their parents were waiting for them just feet away. TJ and Manny followed their parents to the end of the boarding line. TJ couldn't help looking over his shoulder for another Eshu messenger reporter to pop up. When their parents showed their tickets to the flight attendant, TJ murmured to Manny, "Communicating with Eshu has been just as bad as doing that whole Bloody Mary thing with Oya. Eshu said to call him at any threshold, but I'm getting a whole lot of nothing whenever I pray to him under my doorframes at home." After a few moments, they passed the threshold of the airplane. Like always, TJ said a short prayer to Eshu, but was met with absolutely nothing. And it was hard to listen to the call of an Orisha when a flight attendant behind him kept reminding an older guy that while there was no smoking on the flight, liquor would be available to travelers. "You'd think I'd at least feel something, right?" TJ murmured to Manny. "What if Eshu's in trouble? Like you were saying, Oya sounded scared before she went quiet in your head." "Maybe." She lifted her shoulders sheepishly. "No way of knowing, really. Maybe we just gotta find another lagoon and some giant alligators to help us drown in it." Manny rolled her eyes. Let's never do that again, can we?" Manny and TJ sat together in a 2-seat setup on one side of the cabin while their parents sat in the 3-seat middle aisle. TJ had offered Manny the window seat, but she just said, "You take it. My bladder is mad tiny, so I gotta always take the aisle seat." The pre-flight wasn't long, and despite the pressing heft of keepers, reporters, and Orishas on TJ's mind, he was surprisingly at ease as he and Manny fell into casual conversation while they waited. 20 minutes in and the plane was lifting off, TJ's spirits right along with it. And the farther they traveled from New York, the more distance the whole ordeal in the stairwell seemed to go. TJ wondered if it was because he was actively trying to forget his troubles, or because, at the end of the day, there wasn't much he could do about them. More likely than that, his stress had evaporated because his arm was totally brushing against Manny's, and she didn't seem to mind it. "Ugh," Manny said suddenly, 2 hours into their 11-and-a-half-hour flight. "This is why you always scroll to the last page." Her finger brushed over the screen lodged in the seat ahead of them. It landed on a movie poster of a teenage girl between a hairy-chested dude and a pale-as-paste dude. "Perfect. This is exactly the prequel that went straight to streaming instead of theaters." A groan pulsed under TJ's tone. "That's not that vampire, werewolf, blood moon stuff, is it?" "You bet your bottom dollar it is. And we're gonna watch it now." Manny took out her earbuds and shared one with TJ. The wire was a little short, so they had to lean in close, which meant their cheeks brushed against each other, not just their arms. If the price for watching a bad movie was to be this close to Manny, TJ would pay the fee, and add a tip if he could. To TJ's surprise, the movie wasn't all that bad. Well, correction. It was complete garbage. But so bad it was good, even funny. At first, Manny took offense at the little chuckles TJ let loose whenever the lead actress acted as though she was coming up for air between each of her lines, or anytime a dramatic zoom pushed into a character's face after a reveal. Not unlike Mom's Nollywood movies. But after a while, Manny too was laughing alongside TJ. And by the end of the movie, they were straight up whooping and hollering, which earned them a few side eyes and a "be quiet" from Mom. All their laughing had left Manny drained, it seemed. Once the movie ended, they started another one, a nature documentary that put Manny straight to sleep. But instead of leaning her head to the right toward their parents, her chin seemed to magnetize to TJ's shoulder. To say TJ locked up like stone was an understatement. He was stiller than still. His heart forgot to beat, and breathing was put straight on pause. How the hell did he find himself in that position? More than that, Why did it feel so right? TJ would have thought he'd be freaking out about his bony shoulder, but Manny's pillow of a head made it feel like a cloud had decided to rest on him. There was no stress at all, besides trying not to wake her up. TJ had never seen Manny sleeping before. She looked so peaceful with her mouth slightly parted and a light snore escaping her lips. It was a sight he could get very much used to. A shudder sounded to TJ's right. He lifted his chin slowly to find Mom sneaking a photo on her phone. TJ gritted his teeth and gave her a silent, "Stop it." She didn't, of course. She just snapped away, smiling proudly all the while. She even bumped Manny's parents' shoulders and showed them the photo she had taken. Mr. Martinez scrunched his face up, looking a bit bothered, but Mrs. Martinez covered her mouth and TJ could hear a muffled, "Aw." Moms always seemed to love TJ. He figured they thought he was non-threatening and too sweet to do anything with their daughters, mostly because he was generally quiet and kept to himself. They were unfortunately correct, though. TJ's first and last kiss was back in first grade, and that was only because they were playing house at recess. It wasn't like he wasn't interested in girls. He was. It was just scary, opening up and being all vulnerable with someone like that. But as he looked down at the girl sleeping on his shoulder, TJ decided, this year he would change that. Manny was worth taking the chance for. Chapter 8. Gatekeeper, where you at? Hours later, just outside TJ's window, Echo Atlantic stared up at him. Shining skyscrapers jutted from below like giant metal fingers reaching up to bring their plane down. Despite its gleaming glory and colossal structures, it still didn't compare to Olokun, who was taller than their tallest building by a good long way. For a moment, TJ imagined a scene from Rampage, an old arcade game his father always drifted to whenever they visited the Santa Monica Pier. In that game, characters like a King Kong-esque gorilla or a Godzilla-like dinosaur thrash sky-high buildings with reckless abandon. Is that what would happen here? TJ desperately hoped not.
This is your captain speaking. We are now arriving at Murtala Muhammad International.
A tightness curled through TJ's neck, down his body and straight to his stomach. Overpromise and underdeliver, he thought solemnly. He withdrew his phone from his pocket, opened his countdown app, and read, Echo Atlantic's doomsday in 23 weeks, 1 day, 22 hours, 2 minutes, and 10 seconds. Oya must have had some sort of plan. Why else would she have a message for him? What could the plan be, though? Eshu was probably on good terms with her. He'd know what to do. TJ just had to find some way to reach him. Damn, that's it, huh? Manny yawned at his side. It's not like seeing the pictures online. Them towers are stupid huge. Manny quieted down when TJ didn't answer straight away. Then she tried to lighten the mood by quoting god-awful scenes from the Dusk of the Blood Moon prequel, which only earned half a chuckle from TJ. It had been a long while since TJ had been in Lagos, at least 4 or 5 years, and he could barely remember it from back then. One thing that always got him was that he was no longer a minority once he stepped foot on Nigerian soil. Not visually, anyway. As an American, he was as foreign as it got, but it was a different kind of feeling. In this country, he at least looked like everyone else. Mom smiled whenever he mentioned that. Trust me, you and your dad stand out like a pair of sore thumbs. Another thing he was reminded of as they got their luggage, hopped in a cab, and rolled through the busy streets was that, unlike Los Angeles, there weren't a lot of homeless people in the traditional sense. There weren't a lot of folks asking for handouts anyway. Instead, they were looking to work a hustle in one way or another, selling merchandise, shining shoes, or leading unsanctioned tours. TJ even saw some kids straight out of school selling food on street corners, but no begging. The streets of Lagos were a mix of pedestrians, motorcycles, bikes, buses, and cars, all sharing the same street. Bright traditional fabrics for sale lined the corners. Many of the people wore traditional clothing too, though others wore Western-style shirts and jeans. Spices filled the air and TJ's nose, especially as their cab passed by the food stalls. "That's the Naija hustle," Mom said in his ear as they pulled into a shoddy bus terminal. A huddle of other locals surrounded the modern-looking building, shouting for fares and destinations. The place was large, with tall windows and slanted angles sticking out among the unpaved and litter-ridden roads surrounding it. That looming reminder of Echo Atlantic backdropped the whole of it in the distance. Their taxi pulled into the thick concrete structure. Two adults wearing traditional aso oke stopped the vehicle and said they would take it from here. The taxi driver got his pay, headed out, and the whole group was led into a private part of the terminal. TJ knew it had to be private because the moment they passed into the area, he saw a few kids tossing fireballs to one another like they were warming up for a baseball game. "Yo, TJ! Manny!" It was Ayo. He called out from beside a collection of yellow buses parked near concrete pillars. He jogged over to them and a new hairdo bounced with him, loose box braids falling down the sides of his face instead of up in his typical man bun. Two kids with Ifa Academy uniforms rushed by, scuffing Ayo's white sneakers. "Dang it, man!" he shouted. "Watch where you're going! You know how much these cost?" The kids just continued to chase each other through the buses until one chaperone grabbed them both by the collars. "Sup, Ayo!" Manny cupped her hands and stretched out the end of the boy's name. "I don't know, the dirt mark's an improvement to them ugly old Jays." Ayo waved her away with a long sucking of his teeth. Now that he was back on his home turf, his Nigerian accent seemed to be returning a bit, though his attempt at a black urban dialect still dictated his cadence. "It's Ayo, not Ayo. But sure, nice to see you too, Manuela. Just giving your name a little extra sabor." "Oh, let me get that for you real quick." TJ kneeled to Ayo's Jordans and sunk into his ashe. Usually TJ would not volunteer to clean someone else's shoes, especially someone as rich as Ayo, but he was excited to use any kind of magic now that he was among other diviners. All around him, kids were sharing new spells they learned. One student wrapped his entire arm with water, then drowned it with fire, which swallowed his arm in a plume of smoke. Another student, a girl with bright red hair, had a talking raven on her shoulder. And some older students were showing off their new staffs. Concentrating on his own task, TJ focused on the dirt caking Ayo's shoes. His vision alighted, and he could see what magic could clean up the mark, a charm he learned in one of his books. The more he understood the magic at play, the nuances of mystical energy, the better he could boost his ashe. "Idoti piña la rapata," TJ murmured, and he parted the dirt particles from the white rubber of Ayo's shoes. In just 30 seconds flat, Ayo's Jordans were as good as new. Ayo dusted his sneakers. "Dang, TJ, look at you busting out that little Oko charm." Always a tone of surprise. "You do know I got accepted to Ifa Academy too, right?" "Yeah, I'm still trying to work out how that happened when you didn't even rank in the top 20 at camp." TJ knew Ayo only meant it in jest, but he couldn't help the pang of guilt that sliced through him at the words, the doubt that he didn't belong at such an elite school alongside his friends. Manny came to his defense, though, saying, "If going to the Aqua Realm and surviving isn't enough to get TJ in, I don't know what is." "It's going to be great when our memories are back," Ayo said. "My personal healer said it can take as long as a year, though he can't be sure. Before us, no one has come out of the Aqua Realm without being crazy and shit. Maybe that's for the best. Every time TJ talks about his fight with Olo..." "Olo..." Ayo coughed like something was stuck in his throat. "Oof. Something went down the wrong pipe." "Aqua Realm or not," a deep woman's voice came from behind, "Ashe is not allowed to be used in this terminal." TJ seized up with fear. Were they really speaking that loudly? They all turned to see a familiar face approaching them, a woman with muscles so big, particularly in her legs, she looked more like a warrior goddess than a regular woman. It looked like she was actually bigger than when they had last seen her at Camp Olosa. "Miss Graves?" TJ's eyes widened. What are you doing here? I was offered a position for the JSS level Ere Idaraya training. She crossed her toned arms. But don't go changing the subject. Aoife might have locked down this terminal for the academy, but you should still refrain from using magic until we get to New Ile Ife. TJ peered around at the other students to say they were all doing the same, but it seemed like other adults were telling them to calm it down too. That said, good charm work, Mr. Young. Very efficient. Anyway, I came over to tell you all your bus assignments. Mr. Young, Mr. Oyelowo, you will be on the bus marked for JS3 boys. Miss Martinez, you will be on the bus marked for JS2 girls. Can I go with Ayo and TJ, Miss Graves? Manny whined. Splitting up the boys and girls is so dated. It's tradition here in Nigeria, young lady. But boys and girls aren't separated in classes or anywhere else. You can take it up with the school board. I have. They don't answer my calls like ever. I can talk to some other boys too, Miss G, I promise. Please? Please? Can I go on the other bus? Sorry, kid. We'll be leaving in a half hour. We're just waiting for 2 more groups to get in from late flights. And with that, she walked off to check in with a younger group of children who had started up a magical version of rock, paper, scissors, which, by the looks of it, involved the elements of water, fire, earth, and air instead. It's all good, Manny, Ayo said. The drive is only 4 hours total. We'll catch up at the rest stop. By the way, y'all figure out what's what with Eshu or Oya? TJ shook his head. Nothing. But I just got a new idea. His eyes tracked with Miss Graves. It's sort of convenient that the drill sergeant is working at Ifa, right? Manny caught on quick, her eyebrows lifting. Just like Bulawe at camp. No way, Miss G? Ayo adjusted his glasses in an exaggerated fashion. Never. You think she's a keeper too or something? Who's that she's talking to now? TJ nodded to the woman who, after breaking up the kids, transitioned to a conversation with a man who was aggressively bald, including his eyebrows. He must have been a parent, but unlike the other adults bringing their kids in with a smile, the man didn't seem to know how to do anything but grimace. Creepy look or not, it was the way the two of them leaned in close and glanced over their shoulders as they spoke to one another that did it for TJ. Mr. Bolaji? Ayo asked with a tilt of his head that made his braids fall to his shoulder. Yeah, he's kinda weird. But a keeper? Nah. The reason he don't got no eyebrows is because he's a terrible alchemist. Burned them off when he was a student, according to his family. The keepers would never recruit someone as incompetent as him. Yeah. But it's more to it than that. TJ pulled Ayo to a more quiet corner of the terminal near a huge abstract statue of some amorphous blob. Manny watched their backs to make sure no one followed them. On the way here, we ran into this reporter who cornered us at the airport. He told us the keepers wanted me to go to Ifa this year. Maybe it's because they have Graves looking after me like they did with Balawe. Which makes contacting Eshu all the more important, Manny added. Yeah, but how? Ayo asked. We have the full moon coming soon, but no way to get through to Eshu. Well, Manny cleared her throat. We're headed to the best place to research all that, right? Once the last of the stragglers made their way to the terminal, all the students loaded up and headed off for New Ile Ife. Mom had attacked TJ with another pecking of kisses but reminded him she'd be with Grandma for a week and she'd see TJ once the buses arrived at New Ile Ife. Like the other diviners, she went into a private room to portal travel straight to the diviner town. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez headed off with Mom as well. Some of the older students complained that they should have been allowed to portal travel as well, not wanting to go through the long drive. But instructors kept reminding them the trip on the bus was meant to be a bonding experience. Manny had looked a bit down, a step away from all the other girls who were assigned to her bus. TJ must have appeared much the same, as he was assigned at the back of the bus with the other students he didn't know. The students with last names ending in X, Y, and Z, which included him as Young, 2 other boys whose family names were Zachariah and Zainab, and the quiet boy who sat next to TJ whose family name was Yemisi. The boy next to him had very high cheekbones, not unlike Dayo's best friend from Ifa Academy, Adiola. For a moment, TJ wondered how Adiola was doing. Last he saw her, he blasted her with a pretty strong spell that sent her to the hospital. But to be fair, he thought, she was the bad guy. Babalu Aye Medical was in New Ile Ife. Maybe he could visit her when he had time off from schoolwork. The bus started up and TJ glanced back at his seat partner. The quiet boy with the cheekbones kept mostly to himself, so TJ did the same as they pulled out of Oshodi Terminal and toward the long city highways. TJ was still getting used to all the signs reading kilometers instead of miles. Ayo was a few seats ahead of TJ, and he kept looking over his shoulder to make sure TJ was all right. They quickly left behind the bustle of the city. The landscape changed from a concrete jungle with newer cars and Western imports to the more rural vehicles and broken-down buses that frequented the outer country. The lanes got smaller too, and some of the roads were unpaved, making for a less than comfortable ride. When the landscape flattened out to long stretches of brush, the boy next to TJ waved at him. "Hey, how are you? I'm TJ." The boy didn't respond. Instead, he gestured his hands and mumbled. For a moment, TJ thought he was signing. There were a few phrases he knew in ASL, American Sign Language, but he recognized nothing the boy was gesturing. Then TJ remembered. It was likely the boy was trying to communicate in YSL, Yoruba Sign Language. When the boy recognized TJ's confusion, he lifted a finger and pulled out his phone. He typed a few lines on his keyboard and handed the phone to TJ. The screen read, "Emeka. My name's Emeka. Sorry, I'm deaf. You are American, right?" TJ laughed a little, thinking of his mother and the sore thumbs he and Dad apparently were in the country. Was it really that obvious? He typed in his response. TJ. How can you tell? Emeka. You came in from the airport with that girl with the big hair. TJ. Oh, right. That makes sense. My name's TJ, by the way. Short for Tomori Jomeloju. Emeka. I bet everyone messes up your name where you're from, huh? My best friend is American too. He didn't get accepted back to IFA though. Said his grades weren't good enough. Sad face emoji. TJ. I'm sorry to hear that. Is IFA really that hard? Emeka. Yeah, if you don't study. And this year we have the JS3 exit exams to see if we can advance to SS. TJ. SS? That's senior secondary school, yeah? Emeka. Yeah. Oh, right. American. You call it high school or, 10th grade, eh? TJ. That's right. Emeka. Don't worry about the test. There's loads of study methods. I'll show you a few. TJ didn't have much time to think about tests or actual schoolwork, not when he needed to figure out how to get to the Sky Realm or speak to Eshu. There had to be something he was doing wrong when trying to speak to the Gatekeeper. Then again, up until that summer, no one could speak to Orishas, so maybe it was business as usual?
All right, boys, we are officially in Diviner territory once we pass that nature reserve sign just there.
The bus driver pointed to a weathered signpost at the edge of the highway hours later. It sounded like his voice was playing over a loudspeaker on the bus, but there were no speakers fitted in the vehicle. Even if the driver didn't make the announcement, TJ would have recognized they were in New Ile Ife territory. A slight rush passed over his neck as the bus bumped across the rocky road. The sparse tree-lined view in the windows thickened into dense forest. Not only did he feel it, He saw it, too. A huge mist covered the land like a force field bubble, large enough to cover a mountain range.
Last stretch. Just an hour and a half more. Before we go any further, though,
The driver slowed behind the other lines of buses.
you kids should relieve yourselves.
TJ turned to Emeka and typed into his phone again. TJ, did you get all that? Emeka, yeah, this driver is telepathic, so he doubles his words in my head. Thanks for asking, though. They all got out and stretched under the orange hue of the setting sun. Some adults were asking the students to huddle together near a set of shacks that must have housed the restrooms. The rickety structures appeared as though they could tip over by the slightest touch of Oya's wind, and TJ didn't want to get caught with his pants down if that happened. A woman with short hair and wide hips bellowed, "Students, before you all take your restroom breaks, everyone circle up so we can pray to Eshu for allowing us a safe journey." Some of the students grumbled. Emeka went over to a girl with long braids down her back. He gave her a big hug and kiss on the cheek. They held hands as they did their prayer to Eshu. A mass of bushy hair jumped up and down between the JS girl buses coming in, and TJ realized Manny was waving and pointing to the crowd. Then it hit TJ. The chant. I can use the chant to summon Eshu. The rest of the masses all came together in the field and chanted in unison. There had to be at least 150 of them in that field, and TJ could actively feel the energy they stirred in their hymn, even if a majority of the participants were halfway to the bathroom. As he had learned that summer, he pulled on the ashe swimming among the group, letting it funnel through him and out again with renewed strength. To TJ, the experience was like eating a full meal after a whole day of being famished. It was like being given a sugar rush and his brain was lit with more power than it had any right to have. Like all the other times, nothing actually happened. But this time, TJ felt something rock deep within himself. Something was there, and that something was watching him, watching all of them. He knew it. Yet there was no sign in the clouds or some magical tree that spoke a message. TJ wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he was hoping for something more than that. The chant finally ended and all the students scattered to the first available restrooms. When it was TJ's turn to go, he was already thinking up new ways he could get a group together to stir up the magic again for another try. Maybe that Emeka could help them too. He didn't have to know they were calling Eshu. He, Ayo, and Manny could just play up that they were really into the Orisha. The bone-white tattoo on TJ's forefinger grew warmer. That had to mean he was on the right track. He just needed to figure out the correct ritual or the right offering to get Eshu to show himself. He didn't have to do any of that, though, because once he got done washing his hands, Eshu was beaming at him through the reflection of the restroom mirror. Chapter 9. Two-Way Mirror. TJ rubbed his eyes and hit his elbows on the wooden walls of the small shanty restroom. He wasn't sure he could believe what he was seeing, but after the dozenth rubbing of his eyes, he couldn't deny it. Eshu was right there. The Orisha beamed from the other side of the dingy mirror, waving his wooden staff in the air. It looked like he was saying, "Hello, TJ." But TJ couldn't be sure. Eshu's lips moved, but no voice came out. TJ became breathless. A lightness filled his chest. Weeks of trying to call to Eshu, and there he was with his drooping long hat, wide smile, and wooden staff in hand. A staff TJ knew all too well. Well, not exactly well. When he used it that summer, it had looked like his sister's staff, as Eshu had mimicked the design to cloak the true form of the trickster staff. How are you doing this? TJ managed to ask in a hushed voice. Eshu snapped his fingers and a flame birthed from their tips. Then he flicked his staff and a fountain of water sprouted from it. He stood there for a moment, as though waiting for TJ to do something. Throwing up an eyebrow, TJ uttered, "I don't get it." Eshu nearly rolled his eyes and nodded to the sink in front of TJ. "Oh, you want me to turn the sink on?" TJ asked, already flipping up the faucet handle. He waited for something to happen. Perhaps Eshu's face would sprout in the liquid like a water bowl communication. But the water kept running like normal. Eshu waved for TJ's attention again, this time rubbing his fingers together where his flame danced. "Oh, right! The fire!" TJ snapped his fingers and birthed a flame of his own. It took a moment for the heat to do its work, but eventually the mixing of fire and water manifested steam. A few moments after that, and the mirror fogged up. Eshu smiled, then put his finger to the glass and wrote a message. "You worked that out pretty fast, kid." "Eshu, I've been trying to contact you for weeks." TJ's mouth flew a mile a minute. "You know, you could have done a better job of telling me how to contact you. All you said was go to a threshold and pray. I thought I would have heard your voice, or you would have given me a sign, or—" Eshu flipped his drooping hat over his shoulder. Then more writing appeared on the foggy mirror. "I did give you signs." The words disappeared and reappeared. "That man with the spicy corn cart outside your house. You know Eshu loves spicy foods." TJ shut his eyes, giving himself an internal facepalm. He should have known then and there. Ayo had even read off Eshu's offerings when they were trying to figure it out. How could he be so stupid? Again, more words appeared on the mirror. "And on that airplane, I thought that stuff about cigarettes and liquor would have tipped you off. Come on, TJ. You got to be sharper than that." TJ sighed. "Okay, that's fair. But a little subtle, don't you think? Why didn't you pull the mirror trick when I was in my bathroom at home? I spoke to you then at least 3 times a day." "Had to learn this method from an old friend who was a little tight-lipped with their secrets. Ashe flows differently these days. Didn't know about this neat trick before, but it is quite fickle. We've only got a few minutes at most." That was probably true. Already Eshu seemed a bit more faded than he had before. Good thing he wrote out his messages quickly. He was wiping them away and redrawing them like a master of that old Etch-a-Sketch toy. And he had to write it backwards on top of it. Must have been nice being a powerful Orisha. "So, what's going on? This about the big day in February with Olokun, yes?" TJ leaned forward, slumping his weight against the sink again as Eshu's latest words wiped away. "I saw Echo Atlantic with my own eyes. There's no way all those skyscrapers are coming down by February. And there are so many people there. How can I keep them all safe?" "Before you get yourself all worried about the big stuff, make good on your first promise. It's a lot smaller." "You mean regaining Olokun's praise? I haven't thought about that much yet. But that should be easy, right?" "Easier, not easy. How long did it take for us to communicate? It took all those students out there to give us enough ashe to do what we are doing now. Olokun needs many more." "Ugh, some help you are. This is never gonna work then." TJ slammed his hands on the sink. This was a lot of stress to manage, and it didn't help that the restroom had essentially turned into a sauna with all the steam. I should have just let those mer people stick me with their tridents. "Come on, kid. You can make it happen. Listen, this might not work, but there's something we can try. Have you heard of Yemoja's lost gemstone?" TJ searched his brain. He knew Yemoja was the mother to several Orishas, wife to Olokun, and the overseer of the ocean surface. but he had only cracked open the first few chapters of his books. He wasn't sure he'd heard of any lost gemstone before, though, so he shook his head.
Olokun wants Yemoja's power back too.
That wasn't part of our deal. TJ gripped the sides of the sink tighter.
This is true, but we must keep the old grump happy now, mustn't we? Helping the wife out would be a good first step.
TJ didn't like it and had the feeling he was being finessed, but what other choice did he have? Fine. What's this lost gemstone anyway?
Before the Great Separation, Yemoja was building a new frost realm. It went unfinished and she left behind...
Let me guess. TJ finished before Eshu got done writing the rest of his message. This gemstone of hers, right?
Right on the money. Ever since she left it behind, her ice magic hasn't been up to snuff. She's been so sad. Olokun wants nothing more than to make her happy again.
Is that the reason ice caps have been melting?
They were melting well before that. But you mortals have sure as hell sped things along.
But what about the Sky Realm? I don't know if you know, but Oya showed herself to Manny. Said something about us going to the Sky Realm and speaking to Shango?
Oh, Oya's always got her head in the clouds.
TJ couldn't be sure in the fog, but it seemed as though Eshu was stroking the crystal in his staff.
And she's busy during September, stirring up all those hurricanes off the Atlantic coast this time of year.
That much was true. TJ remembered how on the clouded news they always talked about East Coast cities having to board up their storefronts to protect themselves against horrible winds and cyclones. A pounding came at the rickety bathroom door, followed by a thick Nigerian pidgin.
I want shit. Guy, why you there wasted time?
The cracks in the bathroom were just large enough where TJ could see a brown eye peeking through. Yo, step off and give me a minute, TJ returned sharply. I've been holding it a while. Eshu started to fade even more in the mirror, winking out like a dying light. Oh, crud. We don't have much time left, do we? TJ lowered his voice. Okay. I'll go to this frost realm, but are you coming with me? How do I even find it? TJ imagined himself having to trek through Antarctica until he fell over with frostbite.
Somewhere in your world, there's a doorway in the shape of an ice shard. And since the realm went unfinished, no deity can enter it. But since you have your little trick, then maybe...
Okay. I know what you're getting at. TJ rolled his eyes. That summer, Eshu had essentially tricked TJ into being a key to unlock a portal between the mortal and aqua realms. Perhaps that was the same thing TJ had to do now, but for this unfinished frost realm. Can you at least point me in the right direction here? Earth might not look so big to you, but for us mortals, it's a pretty large place to search, and I'm kind of stuck at the academy.
This was many, many centuries ago. But look to the UK. They keep all sorts of neat stuff over there.
I'll ask Elder Adeyemi. She's connected to our magical government over here. Maybe she can get some of her people on it or something. Are you sure this will make Olokun happy?
Guy, why you there talk to yourself?
The boy outside asked. TJ clenched his fist. He forgot to keep his voice down. I'm almost done. I need to psych myself up sometimes.
What's a psych?
The boy asked in Nigerian accented English this time. Never mind. I'm almost done. TJ turned back to Eshu. The staff in the Orishas' hand shook like it was trying to get away from him. Olosa's gonna get big mad with you when she gets out of that thing, huh?
Olosa?
She's still in the staff, right?
Oh, right. Yes, not looking forward to that meeting.
Well, at least we have the start of a plan. I'll start gathering support in New Ile Ife. TJ leaned in closer to the staff. We'll get you out soon, Olosa. Sorry we trapped you in there. Eshu saluted TJ with his staff and disappeared. When TJ finally cut off the faucet and made his way out, the boy who had been waiting for him shoved him in the shoulder. Took you long enough, guy. Sorry, man. I left it nice and warm for you, though. TJ tried for a friendly smile. It was true. He was sweating bullets. What would the boy think, though? That TJ had bladder issues that required so much effort it had caused pit stains and a damp forehead? The boy didn't seem to want to know, giving him a grimace and brushing past. He had a slight limp, and TJ thought he might have hurt himself, but noticed the kid was wearing ankle weights. Before TJ could ask what they were for, the boy slammed the door in his face. Yo, TJ! Manny called from behind. TJ turned to find her near one of the buses, waving him over. She stood next to Ayo, who also gestured for TJ to come. Many of the students were huddled around a line of thick brush, backdropped by the silhouetted buses and the lowering sun. The late afternoon chill was a welcome one after being in that sauna of a restroom. Jogging over through uncut weeds, TJ made his way between students catching up and chaperones making sure no one wandered off. When he got close to his friends and brought them in for a huddle, his voice was giddy. Eshu showed himself to me in the bathroom. Ah, gross! Ayo scowled. Manny smacked him across the shoulder. Not like that, idiot. I was joking. TJ rolled his eyes, ignoring Ayo. So, no need for the full moon coming up. I asked Eshu about Oya. She's busy with her storms in the Atlantic, but he'll get in touch with her. He told me to focus on building hype for Olokun and New Ile Ife. He says there's this frost realm we need to get to, some lost gemstone there that belongs to Yemoja. Yemoja? I thought you said it was Olokun we needed to keep happy, Ayo asked, leaning casually on the bus they stood near. TJ shrugged. My dad always says, happy wife, happy life. Manny snapped her fingers and pointed to the sky. Funny. That's how it works for my dad, too. Right? TJ said. And if we make her happy by getting this gemstone, it'll make Olokun happy. Apparently, it's tied to her ice magic, which has been weakened for a few thousand years or something like that. I didn't get all the details. My talk with Eshu was rushed and this kid kept interrupting me at the restroom. Sounds good, Manny said. Yemoja's my secondary Orisha alignment. I could help with that Frost Realm stuff too. Had no idea she messed around with ice. Manny peeked over her shoulder at the students in the distance. It looked like most of them were all done with the restroom. TJ could even see the kid who had rushed him coming out. Oddly, he started doing jumping jacks and checking his pulse for no particular reason. And don't forget, we need to tell Elder Adeyemi about all this, Manny went on. Bet she can help. I'm hoping so, TJ returned, because I have no idea where to find a gemstone that's been lost for who knows how long. All right, students, all students, one of the chaperones called out. Back to your assigned buses. Next stop, New Ile Ife and Ifa Academy. Ayo pushed himself off the bus he was leaned against, smiling. Man, I love it when we have an actual plan. Chapter 10. Where the Magic Folk Go. Back on the bus, the boys were now allowed to sit wherever they wanted since the rest of the trip was so short and the bonding experience was essentially complete after that 4-hour drive. Ayo sat next to TJ this time, but TJ made sure Emeka wasn't alone, asking the boy to sit behind them. Apparently, Emeka and Ayo had already known each other, but when TJ asked how, Ayo lifted a sharp finger and said, Emeka, I know you could read my lips. Don't say a damn word. Emeka signed back with a smile and zipped his lips. TJ logged it in his mind to bring up whatever had them so familiar later. Anything Ayo didn't want TJ to know, TJ wanted to know. The bus wound a path through thick forest, and like TJ's trip to Camp Olosa with a mystical cab, the bus transformed. Though this time, instead of becoming a bayou boat, the wheels got monster truck big to roll over the uneven path they went through. For an hour, it felt like the bus's path followed a few circles. TJ was sure they had cut at least 2 figure eights. The driver even went backward a few times, but then, on their dozenth turn, they pushed forward into a vine-covered thicket, and on the other side, New Ile Ife. TJ wished he could be on both sides of the bus at the same time to see everything. It was like being at one of those Pan-African festivals back at home. Streets were filled with cloths and Yoruba pattern designs hung from storefronts. Spices drifted through the bus's open window, curry, nutmeg, and uziza from several vendors. But the similarity of sights and smells stopped there. Everything else about the village was, simply put, magical. Instead of flashing billboards like in Los Angeles, there were banners with moving images. One of them advertised a potion that elevated the senses called Essence of Oshun. The Orisha of sensuality was laid out across the bottom of the billboard in a position Mom would have never approved of. The tagline above her read, "Find your inner goddess." Many of the boys on the bus took particular notice. Another banner, this one tall rather than wide, depicted a magical staff that flashed with a crystal of blue and white on its head. Its tagline read, "Yemoja crystals primed and ready at the walking stick. Harness the power of Mother Ocean." Further along, an acorn-shaped building the size of a children's playhouse sheltered fairy people. 2 of the flying creatures held hands as they flew from a window on the 3rd floor. TJ gaped at their shimmering butterfly wings and pointed ears. He'd heard of fey creatures before, but never saw them up close. "Aziza," Ayo explained at TJ's side. "They aren't native to this area, but we give sanctuary to a lot of them here. In fact, I think we host the largest population outside of Benin." TJ wondered why magical creatures needed sanctuary. Protection against the clouded community or from other magical creatures? Emeka handed his phone to TJ, which read, Emeka, "The JS3 elemental teacher is an Aziza." Fairy emoji. "You'll meet her. She's really good with," fire emoji, "magic." From the curves and twists of all the different roads and pathways, TJ could imagine the city from a bird's eye view, looking like an enormous warped hourglass. It seemed the city was built much like any other, with the housing on the outskirts and the shopping within. As the homesteads rolled into streets of vendors and storefronts, TJ caught sight of a shop whose entrance was a doorway framed by 3 staffs of wood, iron, and copper. A hanging sign above read, "The Walking Stick, run by the Bandele family since 1620 CE. Bandele, TJ thought, sitting up in his seat. "Hey, in the aqua, at that pool last year, that Joshua kid, told me to speak to an elder Bandele. He said he had my sister's staff, her real staff." "Oh yeah, he's a staff master around these parts. But look," Ayo pointed to the window near the store's entrance. A shimmering calligraphy stated the shop would be closed for a week. SS1 students spend their whole year making their staffs. Bandele is usually out in some forest looking for a good spot for them to start their crafting sessions. "Don't worry. I'll take you over when he gets back." TJ stared at the walking stick until they rounded a corner to what could only be described as the village square. The statue of an enormous head occupied most of its center. The face was lined from brow to chin, and its hue was obsidian. It was the head of Oduduwa, the great king deified as an Orisha. Drummers surrounded the statue's head, pounding on their instruments and singing Yoruba hymns. But TJ barely registered the drum circle or the massive statue. What caught TJ's attention the most was an enormous mural painted on the side of a towering circular building with a thatched roofing. The almond-shaped eyes painted there shot shockwaves through his heart, because he knew that loving, gentle gaze. It was his sister, Dio. The artist had painted her just the way he remembered her. Wide, straight smile, upper lip slightly bigger than the bottom, full nose, pointed ears. It was like someone had taken her actual face, blown it up and thrown it on the mud walls. TJ's eyes started to water, and he turned away from the other boys on the bus. It didn't help that his gaze settled at the bottom of the mural where Dio's date of birth and date of passing were lovingly engraved with a sheen of emerald paint. A gentle breeze wafted through the bus window and across TJ's neck, reminding him of earlier that summer when he'd sworn he felt Dio beside him. In fact, all last summer he thought there was some sort of connection between them that he must have just imagined. That desire of wanting to see her again swelled in him once more, and he couldn't help it. A tear escaped his eyelid. He brushed it away before anyone could see, but Ayo was sitting so close. TJ couldn't hide it from his friend. Jabbing a fist gently into TJ's thigh, Ayo said, "I never did say how sorry I am about your sister, man. She really was a hero around here." The promised child, TJ thought. If she were still here, she'd probably have no trouble stopping a Lokun and keeping Echo Atlantic intact. Mitigating catastrophes was a Monday morning routine for her. Still, he might not have been his sister, but he had his own unique abilities. He could only hope they'd be enough. "Thanks, man," TJ said, his palm over his heart. "I appreciate you." Wait! You're Ife Dio's little brother?" A voice came from the side. It was the same boy who TJ had held up at the restroom. TJ recognized those sandbag weights wrapped around his bony ankles. And now that he got a better look at him, TJ realized he hadn't quite appreciated his unique appearance. He was like a walking contradiction. Skinny, except for the pudge at his stomach. Tall, except his arms were short, and his thighs were longer than his calves. His face was stretched at the eyes but squeezed in below the nose. "Shoot," he went on. "You should have said something, guy. Name's Umar. My older sister played on the crossover team with Ifedayo a few years back." TJ hoped his eyes weren't too red as he rubbed them. "Oh, cool. That's what's up. Sorry about the restroom earlier. I'm TJ." "Do you play crossover too? You gonna try out for the team? I've tried 2 years in a row, but got cut both times. My baba says I'd be on the team if I had my growth spurt already, and these broom legs filled out. That's why I got the ankle weights, to make them stronger." TJ could relate. Not so much with the growth spurt part. He was plenty tall, but he had chicken legs too. "Nah, I don't play. But my friend Manny does. She'll probably be on the team." "Oh, that Brazilian girl?" Umar perked up. "I thought she wasn't coming back. Hey, maybe you can put a good word in for me, eh?" TJ shrugged with an exaggerated pout. "Maybe." Emeka tapped TJ on the shoulder and showed him his phone, which read, "Emeka, be careful with him. He's a little crazy. All he ever talks about is crossover and working out." "I actually live here, you know," Umar went on. "Just on the other side of the embassy and the Adebayo compound. I hate having to go way out to Lagos just to come back here because of tradition. Oh, looks like we're finally here." Outside the window, the village square transitioned into another forest thicket. The bus bounced over a bumpy road, and ahead of them, the long line of their convoy rocked forward, each bus seeming to dip into the earth below. When they got closer, TJ realized they actually were sinking into the earth, like a roller coaster dipping downward. Emeka tapped TJ on the shoulder and handed him his phone again. "Emeka, hold on to your butt. This part gets crazy." Silly face emoji. Just as TJ handed the phone back to Emeka, His stomach lifted all the way to his throat as they descended into a downward whirlpool of earth. It was like going through a corkscrew on a roller coaster, and TJ found himself tumbling to the ground. After he figured out what was up and what was down, and after a long moment of Ayo helping him, he stood. But it felt like he left his stomach on the floor. He glanced down to see that was literally the case. Well, what was in the inside of his stomach at least. One of the chaperones muttered, "Folule Kyoto," casually, and TJ's airplane breakfast and lunch got sucked up into the crystal of the elder's copper staff. "You'll get used to it, young man," he chuckled. TJ lifted his head in thanks, still too queasy to utter any actual words. Shadow filled the interior of the bus now. Peeking outside, TJ saw that they were in some underground cavern with red earth packed in on all sides and torches implanted every 10 or 15 feet. "Young diviners," the driver announced as he opened the door of the bus, "welcome to the entrance hall of Ifa Academy." The boys gathered their things and filed out into the chill of the cavern. It was more than just a dirt-filled cave, but something straight out of the Temple of Doom. Fire lit the long path of packed earth, ancient pillars, and exotic neon plants that rhythmically glowed like tiny heartbeats. Manny rushed up to TJ from behind and nudged him at the elbow. "Did you throw up? I bet you threw up." Heat flushed TJ's face and Ayo answered for him. "Yeah, he did. All over the bus seat." Giggling, Manny brushed her hair behind her ear. "Don't worry. It gets easier." Ahead, a group of adults and children lined both ends of the cobbled path. Their bodies made a line to a weathered stone cube that stretched up 50 feet to the cavern's high ceiling. Yoruba designs pocketed the cube, revealing different colors at each corner: blue, brown, red, and white. TJ actually recognized the structure from his readings. It was called the Great Summoning Stone. And just like his book said, it resided in the Ifa Academy entrance hall. TJ just assumed the entrance hall wouldn't have been underground. The colors that pulsated from each corner represented a different element, coupled with a statue that protected each edge. Yemoja for the wet and cold of water, Ogun for the cold and dry of earth, Shango for the dry and heat of fire, and Oya for the heat and wet of the sky. As they shuffled closer to the welcoming line of children and adults, TJ recognized the song they were singing, a welcoming melody in Yoruba to wish the students good luck. More than their sung words, TJ pulled out a few faces he knew in the lineup: Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Martinez, Mom, and Iya Akba. TJ held his hands wide, and Grandma wrapped him in a hug. She only came to TJ's middle, and TJ could rest his chin on her scarf-wrapped head. She was a stout little woman with rosy cheeks that were never free from a grin. Planting 2 kisses on TJ, she replied, "I am so proud of you, Tamori Jomelochu." She handed him a handful of candy wrappers, dark and milk chocolates. "You go in there and show them what the ambibolas can do." "Esiun iya agba," TJ thanked Grandma in Yoruba. "Oh, your Yoruba is much better now," she replied in her native tongue. "Your grandfather and I will be in the Amazon for a few months with Bandele to make sure your sister's staff wasn't tampered with. But don't forget to visit us after." TJ gave Grandma one last kiss, then continued walking alongside his friends as they approached the summoning stone. "Here, take these." TJ handed them some chocolates. "They're too sweet for me." "What?" Ayo pushed his glasses up and grabbed the candy wrapper. "You ain't gotta tell me twice. Milk chocolate over dark chocolate all day." "Dark chocolate don't taste bitter to you?" Manny asked, taking her own piece of candy. TJ shrugged. "Usually, but I don't know. This growth spurt has me getting all these weird cravings." "It's okay, sister," a boy said from behind. "He'll come next year, I bet." TJ snuck a look over his shoulder to see an older boy, probably an upperclassman, with his arms slung over a younger girl, likely a junior, possibly a first year, wearing a frown and slumped shoulders. "What's got them down?" TJ murmured to his friends. Through a bite of chocolate, Io took his own peek and shrugged. Those are the kids of that weird guy I was telling you about. The old man who burned his eyebrows clean off. He never shows up to IFA Academy. Bad memories or whatever." TJ narrowed his eyes at the other parents. It was true. The bald guy wasn't among them, but Miss Graves was there, staring right at him from the back of the line at the end of the cavern. "I'm just imagining things," TJ convinced himself. "Just enjoy the ceremony. There's no keepers here." As they crossed the threshold into the soul slit in the summoning stone, the hymns from their parents and friends cut off almost instantly, replaced by the cathedral-like ambiance of the inner chamber. Inside, like a mirror of the statues outside, stood the stone likenesses of Yemoja, Ogun, Shango, and Oya, each tall enough that their legs molded an entrance into their own specific chambers. At the center stood the stone image of Eshu with his hands held out wide, his staff in one hand and a large key in the other. Below him and between his feet stood a woman in a red and black dress, befitting royalty, an elder with the grace of a queen, Headmistress Adeyemi. "Welcome, young diviners," she said soothingly. When she moved her arms, her dress shifted like lava, with red rising from its hem and flowing up to a deep obsidian black. "I am so happy to see you all made the trip safe and sound. Welcome to the entrance hall's great summoning stone. Most of our returning students will already be familiar with the next steps, but for those new to us, you will enter the chamber that calls to your base element or Orisha alignment. There, one of the instructors will help you travel through your respective portal onto the campus. Give the chamber you choose your true name, and you shall pass. After this, you will be led to your boarding rooms, given a tour of the grounds and classrooms, and then you are all to report to the Oracle Rock for your term assessment. Good luck to you all in the new year. You may choose your paths now." "Well, that's Shango's fire for me." Io hefted his backpack over his shoulder. "See y'all on the other side, eh?" "Shoot, you already know," Manny replied as she made her way over to the Oya chamber. "You nervous, TJ?" "Me?" TJ exaggerated his response. "If I can go up against Orishas, this is nothing." Manny laughed and walked off with the other students queuing for the Oya line. But in truth, TJ was all kinds of nervous. He didn't know which chamber he was supposed to enter. This was his whole issue during the summer at Camp Olosa. No specific Orisha or element ever called to him. So how could he choose? Maybe it didn't matter. He could probably just choose whatever chamber and anything would work for him. Considering Mom was aligned with Yemoja and he needed to help get the Orisha's ice powers back, TJ entered the chamber of Mother Ocean first. The chamber was filled with water like a giant pool, but when he tried to enter the chamber's water tank, the portal didn't heed him, repelling him away like a force field. Then he remembered he needed to give his true name. "Tomori Jomeloju Young," he said, but still nothing. From the top of the water chamber, a serpent-like mermaid TJ recognized as a Mami Wata swam down to him and spoke in an odd thought speech. "Maybe you should try the next chamber over, child." It took TJ a moment to answer her because he found himself staring. After he shook the shock from his face, he made his way to the next chamber over. But the Ogun chamber, which was filled with axes, spears, and swords of iron, was no better. Neither was the Shango chamber, filled with its fire pits and lightning rods, or the Oya chamber where storm clouds filled the space. Embarrassment slithered through TJ's gut. If he wasn't allowed to enter the academy at all, did that mean he was unworthy? A few of the younger students who needed help to find their proper place started to whisper as they noticed that TJ young kid. "Is he at the wrong academy?" one of them asked. Isn't that Ifedayo's brother? Asked another. TJ wished he knew some of Eshu's illusion magic so he could disappear. As the last of the students crossed over, TJ was left alone in the inner chamber with Elder Adeyemi. Is everything okay, Tomori Jomeloju? She asked, piercing him with her gentle old eyes. Were you having trouble? Anything I can help with? Oh, no. No trouble. I was just looking for the bathroom. Elder Adeyemi threw up an inquisitive eyebrow. TJ slumped. No, I'm lying. I can't get into any of the portals, ma'am. It's like Mr. Bola... Like Olugbala said to me. Elder Adeyemi gave TJ the opportunity to finish. When it was apparent he wouldn't continue, she finished for him. The book hasn't been written for you yet. If I'm remembering that man's words to you correctly. Yeah, TJ really didn't want to give Bolawe any credit after the man's betrayal only a few weeks ago. Is this some rite of passage? Does this mean I can't attend the academy? Adeyemi lifted her hand over her mouth, cloaking a light chuckle. Of course not, young man. There are occasionally students unable to cross over. I can help you along through one of the portals, but... She lifted a single long finger. I do want to try something first. Come, sit with me just along here. She gestured to the cobblestone, bordered by grass and moss below where she stood. As though in one motion, like a gentle cyclone, she dropped and sat cross-legged. TJ mirrored her movement, sitting across from her. Channel your ashe inward. Repeat after me. She started. Eshu, first honored opener of the ways. Eshu, first honored opener of the ways. TJ repeated. Guardian of the crossroads. Guardian of the crossroads. Lord of choice. Guardian of the crossroads. Lord of choice. They continued the prayer. As Adeyemi recited her words and TJ repeated them, each line brought with it an energy TJ had been familiar with since childhood, a tingle in his fingers that had always brought him good fortune. And as their prayer came to a close, he could feel both their energies roil into one another and blossom into something new, something he didn't quite understand. You who are called Eshu, TJ completed the last line. I honor and sing to you. Please open the gate, accept my prayers, and carry them beyond the crossroads. TJ opened his eyes to a smiling Elder Adeyemi. Backdropping her was a portal leading to a path of green and yellow, like a chartreuse halo around her head. But the portal did not appear at the head of the other chambers, but between the feet of Eshu's statue instead. Oh, yes, she almost whispered. As problematic as Olugbala is, he was right. The book hasn't been written for you, young man. This year will be a most interesting one for you. I didn't know an Eshu portal was an option. It's not. This portal hasn't been open for centuries, if the stories from the ancestors are to be believed. So, I'm aligned with Eshu then? That would make some sense. He did just speak to the Orisha not too long ago. If he showed himself to TJ like Oya apparently showed herself to Manny, that's what could have been going on. No, young man, she said, but I am. TJ's face brightened with curiosity. Elder Adeyemi didn't exactly come off as the Eshu type, but that brought forth another question. If you're aligned with Eshu, then how come you couldn't open his portal? Because the connection was too weak. As it has been since long before I was a child attending the academy myself. The breeze from the other side of the portal brushed across TJ's face, nice and cool. But
How did you get into the portals at all when you were a kid? I had to use my strongest elemental alignment with the help of the instructors then. She gestured her hands to the other large statues around them. Just as some of the young ones needed help today. But with you, you seem to be the key to unlocking the latent powers of Eshu's portal. I suspect it has something to do with your talent for communal magic. There's something more at play here, and we will uncover it in time, together. Speaking of uncovering, TJ started. Then he explained everything that had happened that day from the airport to the restroom. Adeyemi settled in place, so still it was like TJ was looking at a statue of her. Thank you for telling me this, Tomori. This too will need time to process. And I shouldn't keep you anymore. You've got orientation to get to. She lifted up as neatly as she had sat down. She offered TJ her hand and he took it. He was lifted up by her as though he was no more heavy than a small child. Welcome to Ifa Academy, young man. As TJ walked through the portal they created, his finger with the Eshu tattoo warmed a little. He glanced down at its faint glow, then stared back up at the statue of the Gatekeeper. Softly, he said, Thanks, Eshu. I know you had my back there.
Chapter 11. Ifa Academy of Tomorrow's Diviners. Ifa Academy felt more like a conservatory than a school. It wasn't built up as TJ expected it to be. It wasn't some castle, not some collection of huts, no Wakandan palace, not even a building at all, really. It wasn't built up, but rather built around. The forest the academy called home was completely undisturbed, each tree and their roots free to grow where they may, with every structure built around it. The portal TJ walked through was like all the others, all of which funneled to the same entrance grounds of the academy. He peeked behind him to see a row of 5 statues just as tall as the ones at the summoning stone, with Eshu's statue in the center and the other pairs flanking him on each side. Yang? Tomori jo meloshu Yang? A girl came up to TJ's side, but her voice carried the weight of many years. Yeah, that's me. Did you need help? Help? I'm the one who will be helping you. It's your first year, so I have to give you the tour. She pointed to a path leading farther into the academy grounds. Manny and Ayo were waiting near the base of a large tree with a signpost that read, Mess Hall this way. These two said they want to join you. Is that okay? TJ waved over to his friends, and they waved back. That'll be great. Their guide, who was named Oroma, gave them a tour of the campus grounds. She couldn't have been any older than TJ, maybe even younger. But apparently she was hundreds of years old with neatly woven braids in the shape of a basket halo. Absolutely none of the hairs in her intricate hair design was out of place. Never mess with her at night, Ayo whispered to TJ. She, changes when the stars come out. Yeah, Manny agreed. Some girl found her with her head pulled off last year. That's how Aroma gets her hair done so well. She, does it herself. Wait, so is she like a zombie or something? TJ asked, keeping his voice down as well. Manny gave him a so-so hand gesture. No one is really sure. And it's not like you can really ask something like that. But the legend is that some clouded girls in Lagos saw her at night when she took off her head and changed to her multi-arm form. Apparently, she owned a salon over there and was making a killing. That's half the reason I come here, Ayo thumbed to his own braids. But after those girls in Lagos saw Aroma and freaked out, the UCMP had her locked down to the academy grounds to keep her existence on the down low. In other words, I'm under house arrest, Aroma said bitterly. I might be headless sometimes, but I'm never earless, young mortals. As they followed along between a winding path of whispering willows, TJ tried his best not to gawk at what probably wasn't just a scar line around Aroma's neck. The grounds were composed of several sections denoted by elemental alignments. Some classes, Aroma told them, were conducted within the trees where structures were built like tree houses. Others were given within tunneled mud huts, and some even underwater where a river flowed into the academy's single lake. Classes underwater? TJ asked Aroma. How does that work? Those classes are only for the SS students, Aroma explained. You need to know the drowning draft for that. They're taught by those mummy water creatures. Maybe the same one I met at the summoning stone, TJ thought. The living quarters rested in the middle of campus. Just like everything else, the dwellings were hung from trees, tucked into bushes and hidden under roots. TJ and Ayo were given their bunk instructions, which led to a habitat that brought images of old cavemen's dwellings. A set of humped rocks huddled together like a family of beetles. That's where the junior boys would sleep, apparently. Upon closer inspection, TJ noticed the landscape was not naturally designed by the stones. The clay structures were merely painted to look like rocks. Some of the guys actually call our dorms the man cave, Ayo said to TJ, who rolled his eyes as they approached the dwellings under the shadow of the giant trees. Manny's dorm was a little higher up, way above in the canopy in one of the tree houses. It must have sucked for any of the girls up there who were afraid of heights. After they put all their things away and were given their room assignments, TJ was bunked with Emeka. They all followed their guide, Aroma, to a natural stone formation that she claimed was the highest point of all the campus grounds, Oracle Rock. There, they linked back up with the other students, who were at the base of the path that led to the top. The first face TJ recognized was Emeka, who waved over happily. TJ, speaking slowly and clearly, asked what the Oracle Rock was all about. Through text, Emeka explained they and the other junior-level students were going there to figure out which classes and electives they should choose. The climb up took nearly half an hour over narrow precipices and jagged paths. TJ did his best not to look over any of the edges, but it was almost impossible not to. It made him feel a touch better, though, when he saw Ashe barriers of wind that protected anyone from falling over. Emeka turned to TJ and wrote out another message. Emeka. My grandpa says that Ifa is getting soft. In his day, he said it was an actual journey and struggled to get to the top of the stone. The long path up gave TJ plenty of time to think, especially with students all around him mumbling about what their oracles would predict for their futures. TJ was nervous but a little excited to hear what his future held. He never got his future read before. Mom always said those services were expensive, especially the accurate, less vague predictions. And even then, the success rate for most was negligible. Eventually, all the junior students arrived at the flat top of the Great Stone. It was true. It was the highest point of the campus. TJ gaped at the 360 view he had of all the tall trees, where he could make out the tops of some of the treehouse classes and the twinkling of the lake near the willows. He nearly fell over a few times, though. The winds up there were rough. TJ had to take careful steps to the center, where several rounded animal hide tents were set up. JS3 boys will follow me to the tent just there, Aroma pointed to a tent constructed from leopard skins. White smoke billowed from the slit cut in its roof. In alphabetical order, of course, she read from a paper in her childlike hands. Adebayo Uma. You are first to see the oracle. The oddly shaped boy walked forward with his bird chest puffed. When he passed TJ, he said, Wish me luck. I'm hoping they'll predict me making the crossover team this year. But a little while later, Uma returned with downcast shoulders and a frown, saying that the oracle told him it's best to stay clear of physical activities, lest he wanted to be riddled with disappointment and an injury. I'm still trying out for the team, he said, shrugging.
make my own destiny and all that, right? Plus, she told me it's better if I focus on my biology classes instead this year. She can miss me with that.
Next up was a boy named Falu Bankole, who was told to focus on avoiding rough waters, which he interpreted as not enlisting in electives for Oshun, the Orisha of rivers. Later on, a Jomi Davis was advised to keep his head in the stars, which to him meant pursuing advanced classes with Orunmila or Obatala, the Orishas who lived in the cosmos. One of the boys, Okan Ibekwe, was told success would be found so long as he avoided man-made liquid, which he was still trying to figure out. To TJ, the oracle sounded more like a guidance counselor. Then, thinking on it some more, guidance counselors were kind of like oracles to begin with, to varying degrees of success. Then, thinking on it some more, guidance counselors were kind of like oracles to begin with, to varying degrees of success. Each of the oracle sessions ranged from a few minutes to a half hour. To pass the time, Emeka invited TJ and Ayo to play a board game version of Crossover. The whole board fit in the boy's pocket in a folded square. All he had to do was tap his finger, say the magic words, and the whole thing flopped out in the shape of a real miniature crossover field. Miniature fans sitting in the stands and everything. Even the tiny players they used looked real as they air-stepped and scored points, just like their real-life counterparts. Emeka tried explaining the rules of crossover after TJ's first loss, but TJ told him he was familiar with how to play. He just sucked at the sport in real life. And apparently, that translated to the board game version as well. Each time TJ lost, he swapped with Ayo, but Ayo didn't do any better. TJ was reminded of games he played with his father back at home. It was like he was playing NBA 2K on his PlayStation with Emeka, only far more interactive. After TJ's third loss, Emeka swapped teams with him. Apparently, Emeka's little miniatures were almost leveled all the way to max. Despite having the superior team, TJ still couldn't eke out a win, and he suffered 2 more losses when Manny walked up to them. "Oh, is that the new Major League crossover game?" she asked. "It sure is," Ayo answered, signing at the same time for Emeka's benefit. "Emeka's handing us our asses right now, though. I got next." Manny sat beside them on the stone ground. Her shoulder brushed closely against TJ's as she tried to give him pointers. Her advice helped, but TJ was too far behind for it to matter much, and eventually, he took another big fat L. When Manny started to play, she busted out her own player set from her backpack, and the match between her and Emeka was well above anything TJ and Ayo could have done. Manny was doing combos only someone as familiar with the game as she was could manage, making her players work together for longer and higher air-stepping maneuvers that outmatch Emeka's plays. "What predictions did you get?" TJ asked Manny. Manny got in such a groove that she stopped paying attention. I hate Oracle Okoro. He gives me those fortune cookie predictions every year. So vague and busted. Like, what is, if winter comes, can spring be far behind, even mean? "That's what happens when teachers get tenure, my baba says," Ayo said, staring at the crossover game as though he could figure out how Manny was doing so well just by watching. "They get lazy when their jobs are insured and whatnot." There were only 20 or so other boys along with TJ in the JS3 levels, but they were up on that rock for nearly the rest of the day. Each time someone got a reading, especially those with more difficult ones, the oracle had to take a break and resume work a few minutes later. When the next boy, Ekan Kabiru, came out, he said, "She's taking another nap." Everyone groaned and went back to whatever social circle they were in. Apparently, all the napping was to refresh the oracle's divine palette with Obatala, the Dreamweaver, and Orunmila of divination. During these breaks, TJ noticed the diversity of those visiting the Great Rock. It wasn't just students. Adults poked in and out of tents of all shapes, sizes, and cultures, from big Greek-looking dudes with bunched Hammadians, blind Japanese-looking women with simple robes called itako, and Native American-looking people wearing moccasins and hides. Ayo probably noticed the wrinkle creasing its way through TJ's forehead because he explained, Ifa Academy is known for two things: elementalism and divination, specifically oracle readings. People from all over the magical world come here for predictions of the future, even those Norse folks way up north. Baba said that's where most of our funding comes from. So, what's it like going in there? TJ nodded to the tents. Ifa readings are like doctor's appointments. What do you mean? It's like this. Say you go to the doctor. What do? Give you a diagnosis and suggest treatment, right? Right. Well, basically, our oracles give you suggestions. It's not future telling like you might be thinking. I mean, sometimes it could be like that, but not always. Dio entered TJ's mind at that moment. He could almost imagine a 12-year-old version of his sister waiting ahead of the sea of tents, just as TJ was waiting now. Was she nervous, he wondered? Probably. That's what Dad had said before Camp Alosa anyway. But Dio couldn't have ever known what the oracles would predict for her, something far more compelling than what activities she should take after school. To get his mind off his sister, TJ asked Ayo, So I can ask what I should have for breakfast tomorrow then, right? Ayo laughed. Nah, readings are usually about nurturing good fortune you have now or warding off bad fortune that might come. Oh, yellow wo, Ayo daji, Aroma called out, patting her braids instead of scratching them out. The oracle will see you now. Remember, no asking about trivial matters. Only questions about your placement in your classes, please. And I've got some good fortune coming my way right now. Ayo patted TJ on the back and skipped to the tent. As Ayo slipped into the tent, Manny and Emeka's Major League crossover game ended, with Manny taking a blowout victory. They congratulated each other, but Emeka wanted to run it back to reclaim his honor. In their second matchup, Emeka had an early lead, so he got comfortable, just as Manny had. During timeouts, he even spoke with TJ through his phone. Emeka. Nervous? TJ typed in his response. TJ. Only nervous the oracle might fall asleep on me. LOL. Emeka. It'll be all right. You'll do fine, I bet. I like your watch, by the way. TJ peeked down at his oversized digital watch. Mugen Jin and Fu from the anime Samurai Champloo were painted over it. TJ. You know about this show? Emeka. Of course. We got an anime club on the weekends. You should come through. TJ. Say less. I'm there. Emeka. Bet. Holding you to that. As Emeka took a victory against Manny, TJ and Emeka continued speaking on their favorite anime. TJ's being Full Metal Alchemist, the Brotherhood version, and Emeka's being Death Note, if it ended after its first arc. After a while, Ayo came back out to say he was advised to give an old interest a second chance where the bay rises, which he figured meant he needed to focus more on the spell work of his water magics. A few more boys were called up, but their readings were very quick, only 5 to 10 minutes apiece. Soon, Emeka was up next. He went in with a bit of a skip. Well, not a skip exactly, but certainly a happy little jaunt. But when he came back out, he held his head low and his shoulders even lower. TJ was about to ask him what happened when he heard his name from the side. Yes, the young boy is up next, Aroma the chaperone said to a handheld water bowl. You and the others should come over now. TJ pretended he wasn't listening when the woman child spun around to announce, Young, Tomori Jomeloju, you're next. Gesturing for TJ, Aroma waved her tiny hand into the mouth of the tent. A few of the other students stopped their chatter to watch what TJ would do. Was this going to become a common thing all year? TJ wondered. He certainly hoped not. He was nervous enough on his own, but with everyone else taking notice only made it worse. Trying to forget all the eyes on him, TJ obeyed, stepping forward. Good luck, Manny gave him an awkward thumbs up. Yeah, don't blow it, Ayo added with a chuckle. TJ waved back at them furtively as his heartbeat kicked up with each step. He reminded himself this wasn't a test, not like the assessment he got at the beginning of the summer. All he had to do was sit there and listen to the oracle. Easy. Chapter 12. Perceptive Placement. Once inside the tent, TJ forgot all about his nerves, his shaking fingers replaced by a lifted, stilted brow. Where TJ had expected to find a lot of hanging herbs, African masks on walls, or incense smoke billowing within the tent, instead he found himself among whiteboards filled with mathematical equations, computer screens lined with code, and the low thump of lo-fi beats playing an ambient tone in the background, from a high-tech DJ-grade setup no less. The only thing traditional about the place was the Opan Ifa diviner board, which rested at the tent's center over a threadbare rug. That and the woman wearing flowing aso-oke robes in the center of the room. Her back was turned to him and she was hunched over in what looked like prayer. "Good afternoon, Miss, TJ trailed off, not sure how to address the oracle. The oracle turned around to face him. The features on her face were just as shocking as the rest of the place. She was young, very young, like perhaps straight out of university young. In fact, she reminded TJ a lot of his sister's best friend, Ariola, very spunky looking with high cheekbones, though with a little pudge. She wore thin-rimmed glasses covering up small eyes. She had locks dyed green. Her body? Definitely curvy. She was, in one word, cute. "Ruby is just fine, love," she said with an English accent. She flashed a very youthful grin. Unblemished cheeks, perfectly white teeth, the whole nine. Hello? I'm TJ Young." "Young? You're not related to Ifedayo Young, are you?" "Yeah, but shouldn't you already know that as the oracle?" "If I had a pound for every time I've gotten that response." Ruby shook her head with a chuckle. "But I do remember your sister had a very unique reading." "I heard one of those readings back at the camp I came from." "Well, maybe I didn't. Someone." TJ was saying a lot of things he shouldn't have been. It was made up apparently. At least part of it. The one that goes, "A promised child will rise with the light of a dying falling star, and the last monarch will return once more," she finished as she leaned forward into what looked like another prayer. But she bent low to punch in some keys on a keyboard propped up on a pillow next to her. "Yeah, that reading," TJ said. "But I was told that prediction was made by the keepers, not by the oracles here at Ifa. How did you know it?" "Oh, because I'm the one who did the reading initially." The oracle said the words offhandedly as she typed away. TJ stood frozen in place. He must have heard her incorrectly. Did that mean this oracle Ruby woman, young woman, was the one who started it all? But that didn't make sense. She would have been barely out of Ifa Academy or wherever she graduated from to make that reading on Ifedayo. "And don't be daft about those terrorists, love." Ruby snapped her fingers and waved them in front of TJ's face. "I'm not with the keepers. Never was, never will be. They were just the only ones taking my readings seriously at the time." She gestured to their surroundings. "As you can see, my little spot here is a bit unorthodox. Looks more like a lab than the traditional tent preferences. And the old stooges couldn't have that, could they? The New Age methods were frowned upon back when I had just started my studies at the Institute of All Magics. That, and people found my Orisha wonder combo of Orunmila and Ogun too confusing to wrap their heads around." "Ogun? I thought he was into iron and all that stuff." "More than just iron, which tends to get inconveniently forgotten." He's the father of technology and innovation as well. Hence, my mixing of the cosmos with... She lifted a laptop at her side. Computations and algorithms. TJ knelt down to be eye to eye with Ruby. Is that seriously why no one listened to you? Because you used a computer instead of a divination board? Oh, yes. Some of the old geezers in New Ile-Ife are quite entrenched in tradition. Hell, old farts in general tend to be that way. A new song played on Ruby's lo-fi playlist and she skipped it from something less rhythmic and more chill. But I was quite interested to see how far I could push my new methods. And there was one group that allowed me to work freely. Though at that time they weren't as radical as they have been as of late. TJ was reminded of Adiola last summer. Didn't Elder Adeyemi say she had a change of heart ever since Dio passed away? Perhaps there were more than a few who had turned away from the Keepers, like Ruby. Though with the latter, it seemed she never was associated with them officially to begin with. And through TJ's cursory research, he found out that the Keepers had not always been an extremist group. Tell me, TJ, Ruby intoned curiously, what do you know of divination? TJ shrugged, thinking back on the fortune cookie reading Manny had received. I don't know, just that it's a bunch of riddles. If you'll indulge me before we begin, I can explain a bit about what I do that's so off-putting to some. TJ nodded, leaning forward with interest. He tried his best not to get tangled in the wires strewn across the tent floor. You see, oracle work and our readings come in two parts foundationally. She shifted on her knees to one of her whiteboards and drew two boxes with a green marker. One, of course, is the spiritual, the act of communicating with the divine and trying to decipher the messages given to us, whether through a divination board. She gestured to the Opan Ifa sat ahead of her. Through dreams. She thumbed to the flat cot behind her. Or via the signs given to us throughout the day, such as omens or what have you. You following me? TJ nodded as he sat cross-legged across from Ruby, completely enraptured. The second part is specific to the act of predicting the future, Ruby wrote in the second box on the whiteboard, as it has been for years and years before the invention of the modern computer. We oracles did this by listening to Orunmila and transcribing what we got through visions and the like. TJ quirked an eyebrow. Think of it a bit like Google Translate. Ruby faced her laptop to TJ, where she pulled up the translator site with a simple phrase. If you send a certain phrase through the program enough times, the meaning of the original is almost completely lost. It's our job to unscramble that. Thus, as you pointed out earlier, what would seem like a riddle. We oracles do not speak in puzzles for the fun of it. Well, not us good ones anyway. It really is just the best we can do with what we're usually given. Of course, there are other prevailing theories, like the idea of these codes being muddled because they are intended for the one who the reading is about. And it's that person, and that person alone, who should be able to uncover the truth so no one else can. But the jury is still out on that one. She scratched at her eyebrow and scrunched her face. But that's a tangent, innit? Apologies. No, this is interesting stuff. TJ sat up straight to look more interested. He really was keen to learn, but he might have zoned out a bit during her explanation. You're too kind, love. She smiled. I'll try to speed it up. So, as a child, I took a liking to coding and algorithms. I was very interested in deciphering the inherent laws of prophecy. Just as there are laws of physics, I thought surely there had to be laws of divination as well. So I started looking at patterns from predictions across all cultures, all eras, everything. And I came up with the program. She slid her finger over her trackpad and the laptop screen showed a line of code that looked like a whole lot of gibberish to TJ. Laughing, Ruby said, I swear not to get into the specifics for this part. Essentially, I've come up with some arrangements that have made my readings at least 4% more accurate than those other geezers that call themselves oracles. You see, futures are really just a calculation of probabilities within divine encryption. That's why certain prophecies and the like have, she threw up air quotes, expiration dates. You mean old prophecies could just go away? TJ asked, thinking of Dio and the business about the promised child again. If that were the case, what he heard back at camp could have been just that, an expired reading. Yes, some can go bad, just like milk. It depends, really. She glanced behind her and an old-fashioned clock TJ hadn't noticed before chimed twice. Anyway, let's begin. Today, we'll just be looking to see what elective will be best for you this year. Do you already know your Orisha alignment? I know it as in I don't have an Orisha alignment. Very interesting. Well, I do like a challenge. The ritual started off as TJ assumed it usually did. Ruby gathered Iken Ifa, sacred nuts, in her hand and cast them to her divining board. She asked TJ a few personal questions about his interests, like his affinity with water bubble charms, and his worries, like his having to play catch-up that year. Ruby would, under her breath, turn to her board, type away at her laptop, and recycle the process. Twice, she took naps after a few particularly difficult series of questions and answers that got her readings jumbled up. Or at least, that's what she said. TJ was shocked she could sleep on command before she told him a sleeping potion was laced in the soda bottle she drank from. But it went on like that, getting into the ritual, divine board, Ruby asking a few questions. All of that continued for what felt like hours before finally... Yep, you are very difficult indeed, Ruby croaked after a third catnap. Very murky. A lot of guesswork. But she click-clacked a few keystrokes on her computer. With the help of my program here, I think I have something. Though I don't at all see how this can be related to your schoolwork. That said, you and I are quite familiar with some of the phrasing here. The embers are stoked, but the falling star has yet to blaze its trail, hot and bright. When youth sprouts in a burst, like inward for your compass, your sight. Ruby blinked slowly, still tired. All that artificial sleep must have been catching up to her. It's fun when they rhyme like that, eh? She made a note with pen and paper set to one side. What in the world did any of it mean? Even though Ruby explained that she never meant to speak in riddles, her reading was still pretty infuriating. So? Ruby looked back his way with eyebrows raised. Any of that make sense to you, love? Good. At least she's on the same wavelength as me. Like you said, TJ began, I've heard the falling star stuff before, but I don't know what that new message means. And, the youth sprouting could be my growth spurt. Maybe. Maybe. If they talked it out a bit, maybe they could figure it all out. TJ was sort of a big fan of getting answers, so he asked, why don't we try again? Maybe you'll discern more in the stars, or, your code or whatever. Ruby shook her head as she changed her playlist again, to something that sounded more like alien mutant whales mating than music. She scrunched her forehead into thin lines and rubbed her temples before saying, your readings will just be the same, unless you're planning to make some big life change, like, say, getting on an airplane and leaving Ifa Academy tomorrow. Do you have anything like that planned? TJ wondered if it would be a good time to bring up his little predicament with the Orishas or that reporter at the airport, but he wasn't sure he was allowed to. Elder Adeyemi hadn't given him the go-ahead on something like that, so instead he said, no, I don't have anything like that planned. Well then, since you don't plan on doing anything like that, any readings I do now or over the next few weeks or months will be the same. That's why we typically do these once before each term, when change is most prevalent in a student's life. I see. Okay then. But TJ wanted desperately to be forthright with Ruby. She seemed so cool. Something within him stirred. Maybe it was some residual magic from all the divination that was going on in the room. But a balloon swelled in TJ's chest. Good. All of this could be helpful going forward. I mean, there was nothing about your guidance for classes, but... A ding came from the laptop. Oh! Ruby's shoulders did a little jump. There's some more here. It says, do not be alone when the moon is brightest. The shadow between friend and foe is thick. Keep your eyes wide in the fog. Your heart will rise with first love in the clouds of a celebrated region. In that order? TJ joked, but part of him wondered if he had something to do with that new message on Ruby's computer. That's for you to experience and decide. Really? No riddle? There is one I can give you that's pretty straightforward. Oh yeah? TJ sat up straight again. What's that? Put some pillows on the floor on the left side of your bed before you sleep tonight. And, she gave him a wink. Good luck this year, Mr. Young. After TJ got done with Ruby, he stepped out of the tent to find a twilight sky above. Icy wind lapped across his face, making him sniffle. He stood before at least a dozen men and women wearing entirely different outfits. Elder Adeyemi stood as their vanguard. She was rocking yet another dazzling dress. This one looked like an actual sun setting within the fabrics of her silks or satins or whatever it was. A few women to her left wore grass bell skirts with towering flowered headdresses, and next to them a group of very tall, dark, and thin men who wore red patterned fabrics. To the right was a collection of men and women with thin robes and pointy hats that shimmered. The rest of the crowd were people donning the typical linings of Aso-oke native to the land. Elder Adeyemi spread her arms wide, and the sunset in her dress rose with them. Hello, Tomori Romeloju. How did your reading go? Are all these people here to see me? TJ realized his question might have come off a bit rude and conceited, so he reined in his tone for a more deferential one. I mean, where's everyone else? Am I the last student? I didn't realize it was getting dark already. A few of the others around Adeyemi whispered to each other, their murmurs as chilly as the early night winds. The way they gave TJ sidelong glances made him certain they all indeed were there because of him, because of what Ruby said back in the tent. I've sent the other JS3 boys to their dwellings, Adeyemi explained, then lifted a hand to Aroma, who had been dozing off atop a jutting rock. The headmistress cleared her throat. Oroma? Please, escort TJ back to his quarters while my cohorts and I have a conversation with Ruby. What were they going to discuss with Ruby? TJ wasn't sure he was ready for a bunch of strangers to know what he thought was supposed to be a private conversation between him and his oracle. Wasn't there some sort of oracle-patient confidentiality or something? Rubbing sleep from her eye, Aroma groaned. Yes, headmistress. Of course, headmistress. I'll take him now. Despite her clearly trying to hold it back, Aroma yawned. It made TJ yawn too. Elder Adeyemi smiled, glided over to TJ and put a hand to his cheek. Sleep well, Mr. Young, and listen well when you dream. Obatala is always trying to communicate at night. She turned her head to the rest of the waiting group. The oracle is ready for us. Everyone, follow me, please. Each man and woman in their foreign and not-so-foreign garb entered the tent. Ruby's spot wasn't small, but it also shouldn't have fit as many as were piling in. TJ was sure some magic was at work there. Well, don't just stand there being nosy, Aroma snorted, waving TJ over. Follow me. They're the ones crowding in on my reading. TJ thumbed behind him, but Aroma had already set off, humming a tune on her lips. By the time they made it back down Oracle Rock, across the flat bridges, through the shallow rivers, and back through the thicket leading to the JS3 rock dwellings, TJ forgot everything Elder Adeyemi told him about listening well to his dreams. Instead, he fell right into his soft bed and saw nothing but absolute black.
Ajalon, Winnie